session for this sitting of the Education Committee. So I'll just begin with the usual housekeeping. I would advise anybody in, apologies, I'm going too quickly, advise members that the meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I would advise anybody in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted, and also the reminder it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies. We have apologies from Cara. I think probably all members would want to join me in congratulating Cara on her wedding recently, and hope she's well. Other than that, are there any other apologies? No, that's everybody else here. So that takes us to item 2 on the agenda, Chairperson's business. First of all, I'd like to extend a welcome to John Burrows, who's joining the committee. You're very welcome. And I think also just to put on record our thanks to Colin for his time on the committee and his input. So I assume all members would want to join me in that. So really, in Chairperson's business, I would just add there has been an item tabled there at page 3, which is a press release which has come in from a joint consortium of youth organisations, trade unions and equality organisations, and I did just want to speak to that at the outset because we are in our first evidence taking sitting of the new session, and we've got a really busy forward work plan in progress, and with a big focus on those key issues in education. So I just wanted to note some concerns that we have had a very vocal start to the new session from the Minister, but perhaps not necessarily on the issues we would have expected. And I think in the context of a SEN crisis, which we debated in the Chamber this week, where we didn't have written or public statement from the Minister, that the first issue that has been laid on is the issue of removal of guidance to support transgender pupils in schools, and it certainly felt to me like a bit of a distraction from the real issues that this committee is wanted to be focused on. It does feel a little like the Minister wants to talk about anything other than the issues that parents and pupils and educators are bringing to us. And I think the press statement highlights the concerns about the outworkings of the Minister's intervention. But I would like to propose, just in terms of the fact that we have had a very clear policy decision and intent set down by the Minister, and I would hope would maybe have some correspondence from the Minister potentially outlining some of that for committee. But I'd like to propose at this stage that, just given the concerns that have been raised, that the committee may want to give some consideration to writing to the Minister. And for me, my main issue is really around the vacuum that's been created with this. It's a very sudden intervention, and it potentially leaves schools in a position where they've no framework in terms of understanding how they're meant to support pupils who identify as transgender, and it will undoubtedly be leaving transgender pupils feeling very fearful about the impact of this and what the support that they may have relied upon in school will now look like. So I think those are real concerns, and as a committee we should I certainly don't want to be seeing a scenario where schools are left in a vacuum of guidance and where pupils are left uncertain about their place in their school and the support that will be provided. So I do think we need some clarity from the Minister around that, and I would want to suggest that we get a piece of correspondence away as committee asking what interim guidance is going to be provided, how soon can we expect clear final guidance to be provided. And I think I would like to know as well if the Minister will share his legal advice on this in terms of why this intervention was necessary, because I do note we haven't had similar interventions from other departments. So my position on this is really just raising the concern about the absence of clarity now for schools and pupils. Happy to open that up for discussion, and if there is agreement that is an appropriate intervention. This is not the issue I expected to be speaking about at committee, but the Minister's very clear this was absolute top priority, number 1 item on his agenda. He's led the week on it. So I think the committee is duty bound to respond to that, and I would hope there'd be some agreement about a piece of correspondence we could get away. Is there agreement on that, or can I open that up for anything further?
Deputy Chair, I mean, there are a couple of issues. One, as you mentioned, all the other departments are waiting on the Equality Commission to give their interpretation of the Supreme Court ruling. But secondly, the Supreme Court ruling itself didn't make any reference to how children should be treated in school. And I mean, I think the Minister's jumping the gun. I think it's, as usual on this issue, it's ideological rather than anything else.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chair. Any other views?
Yep. No, thank you very much, Chair. I'll pick up first of all on Deputy Chair's point there around the Quality Commission. We'll expect that in about 2028. I think the Quality Commission is writing out to a number of different bodies and eventually take the High Court. So, in absence of that, and given the fact that this Supreme Court ruling came through on the 16th of April, I think the Minister is absolutely right to act on it. Certainly from my perspective, I have no issue with what the Chair has outlined in terms of actions. I clearly wouldn't agree with the Chair in terms of how he framed it.
Understood.
But in terms of actions, I think that's absolutely fine. But the guidance that was there, just to remind members, which was, as the Chair outlined, it was non-statutory advice, transgender people to access facilities such as toilets and changing rooms align with their gender identity. Now, that causes problems. I accept that there's a space to work through in terms of what happens next, but that was causing problems. I was out at schools over the summer and speaking to principals, and they were saying to me that did cause issues for them, because when you have a boy who is identifying as a girl and wants to use girls' toilets or wants to change with the girls, that's a real issue, because rights, no right should trump other rights. And I think the Minister was completely right in what he outlined around both changing facilities and toilets, because ultimately that's an issue about privacy and about safety, and that's what we want to see in our schools. And I believe what he outlined is common sense. I think, and it's been well rehearsed in the media this week, that actually the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland, 74%, agree with the Supreme Court ruling in terms of references of sex to be biological sex. The committee chair was right that it didn't cite what we're talking about today, but also even the Equality Commission came out and said it will have significant impact in terms of its application to Northern Ireland law. So I think what the Minister has done is the right thing. I think ultimately every child in Northern Ireland needs to be cared for, needs to be looked after, and needs to feel welcome in their school. But that obviously, where rights interface with other rights, I don't think the rights of, for example, a trans young person should trump the rights of maybe girls in a changing room facility, or girls in a residential setting, or girls, using girls' toilets, for example.
I think clearly, Peter, there's not going to be agreement around the table, and wasn't expecting that. I think for me, and this is where I hope the committee could agree, is that whatever your views are, we've now created a vacuum, and that creates a problem. So I'll take your point, Peter, that you're content with the proposed correspondence, but disagree on how I introduced it. So that's fine. So John, I had indicated from Danny, and then I'll bring you in, Danny.
I was just going to support what you said, Chair. I think we all just need to be very conscious that there's many young people who are victims over the last number of years, particularly the campaign against them, and those are trans kids. And we are an education committee, and we are leaders, and we should lead. And that does take an easy wallop at them, because this is exactly what it is. And dealing in hypotheticals. I can't tell you how many principals I speak to and school leaders. It's never been an issue, not once. So to me, it's hypothetical stuff for the jumped up and distract from what the real feelings are within our education system. So I support what you're doing. I don't want to have a ding dong about it. I'm just saying people should be very, very clear in themselves that these are kids who are facing the hardest bit, and it's not nice to hear us on the news again in the first week. It's not for them. And if you have not spoke to a trans young person, I would advise you to go and do it, because you'll get your eyes opened.
Thank you, Danny. John?
Chair, yes, to just make the point, and I have no issue with your actions, but I think it's important to put on the record that what you describe as the vacuum in terms of guidance, an absence of guidance is better than guidance that's plainly unlikely to be legally indefensible. And the Supreme Court, and the clues in the title is the Supreme Court, yes, they have a narrow interpretation or application, because that's the way legal cases work, but everybody accepts that it's likely to be highly persuasive in every interpretation of gender as being biological sex. So I think it would have been remiss of the Minister not to have taken this action and actually put this on the agenda, because otherwise we would have had an education authority with official advice that was highly likely to be unlawful. And I think we always have to learn the lesson of things like other major, I'm not sensationalising, but you had the Rotherham child grooming debacle. And why I say that is this. Where we become so concerned about the sensitivity of people who are affected by something or how it's going to be perceived in the media, and then we actually change our policy approach by avoiding dealing with it, you actually end up creating a massive risk. And I understand it's a sensitive issue. The vast majority of people who are trans will pose no threat to anybody. The same way as the vast majority of people who identify as heterosexual males or heterosexual females or males or females won't. But what we cannot do is allow ourselves to be worried overly about a reaction to something to stop us doing the right thing. And that's a point I just want to make abundantly clear, that in my view the Minister has taken appropriate action.
Thank you, John. I think for me this is not around sensitivities, this is around ensuring children are properly supported in school, but that's again
you've mentioned sensitivities and how it's impacting people.
You've made your point very clear, and an agreement on the action arising. Again, same as for Peter, with not accepting the premise perhaps of which I presented it on. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to get into, like Danny says, a ding dong with anybody. The decision was, I'm sure, really distressing for trans kids in schools to hear. That chill factor that will absolutely have created in schools is just very difficult to comprehend. There was also compounded today with the decision to remove research about the experiences of LGBT children within school settings. I do have a few of those stats here from that research, and I would like to read them so they're on the record for this committee, so these kids actually don't feel completely erased and their experiences completely erased. So if you don't mind, 48% of respondents to that research had experienced bullying as a result of their sexual orientation or gender identity. The main forms of bullying experienced by LGBT young people included name-calling, lies or false rumours, being isolated by other pupils, hit, kicked, pushed or shoved around. And of those that said they were bullied, 31.6% were bullied several times a week. So that's the context that all of this is happening in. And I think it's really important that those kids know that people are aware of that, and that is understood and recorded in this committee, that we know and are aware of that and are aware of the full context of that decision. I'll just close by saying it was clearly a distraction tactic by the Minister to do what he did and when he did it. This could have happened months ago. It happened on the first day back, on the day when we had a send motion. I don't think that was at all by chance. I think it was planned. I think the things that have happened subsequently were also planned to distract from other things that put the Minister under pressure in terms of his performance within his own department. And the cynicism behind that decision making, again, compounds just how sinister all of this is. So thank you for giving the opportunity to say that, Chair.
Michelle, look, I think we clearly don't hope Kathy just to come in. Yeah,
just really briefly, Chair, sorry, I just want to pick up on both what Danny and Michelle said about at the heart of this is these young people, and we only have to look at the very fact we have the mental health champion in here discussing with us how bullying impacts on children, how just going through life is so difficult for children at this minute in time. And we've seen the coverage from the mental health champion and how she's come out and her concerns around this as well. So I think it's time that we all woke up and realised that there are children at the heart of this. So I just want to put on record that I support what you propose as well.
I think everyone's everyone's had their opportunity to put their views in the record.
Well.
I'll give David. I'm not going to bring members back in, but I'll bring David in to make a point.
I concur with my colleagues beside me here, Chair. But I do think we need to come back on sort of the inference. I think on that. Don't want to ding dong like anybody else, but the inference that that somehow the Minister said, well, he believes this is about restoring common sense. And what I don't like is the inference that somehow it's an enabler of bullying. Bullying is never acceptable. Whatever people are being bullied for, it's wrong. We're very clear on that. I've no doubt the Minister would be very clear on that. And we've had that today. We had the concerns raised by the Alliance Party leader yesterday that teachers would be responsible for bullying, which I think is concerning as well. I think we need to be careful about that narrative as well and how far we push that. Bullying is wrong. It shouldn't be tolerated in our schools, whatever the reason, and we shouldn't conflate the two issues.
Thank you, David. I think everyone's had their opportunity to get their remarks on the record. I think the important thing is we have a piece of correspondence that we agree that in this policy space we need some clarity from the Minister now in terms of where things go from there. Okay, members, I think I would just want to add to that, just to close item 2 off. We have a new session here started in the committee. I think we know the scale of the challenges within education, and I hope this committee can really focus on those issues and will not be too distracted by noise from the sidelines. I'm certainly very keen to start taking in evidence on our SEN inquiry. I'm sure anybody who spent time in their constituency office over the summer knows what a huge issue that is to parents across the board, and they expect us to be doing the scrutiny work on that. Item 3 is draft minutes, so I'd refer members to the draft minutes of the committee meeting of the 2nd of July. Seems like a distant memory now. That's at page 6 of your papers. Can I get members' agreement that this is a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, item 4 is matters arising. Plan to take this very, very briefly. A lot of this, I imagine, may be carried over to next week. We did have a strategic planning session on Monday, but it really unravelled very quickly due to pressures of assembly business. So we have just a couple of things I wanted to do, and I'll cover this very briefly. Very brief check-in just on ways of working, to check that there are no members who have any strong feelings on any alternative ways to conduct the meeting. Currently, we have the structure where, in terms of evidence sessions, that the chair will commence the evidence session with questioning, bring in the deputy chair, at which point I take indications from other members who are each given as a guide 5 minutes each. Are we all content with that as a continued way of working? I want to just ask on one other point, one that perhaps we've not nailed particularly well, but I would like to nail it at this meeting, is that we are agreed that our normal practice should be 2 evidence sessions per committee meeting. So I want to make that really clear, and I'd be expecting then through the clerk's team, if there's ever a scenario that there's going to be 3 briefings, that members are given advance notice of that, and we understand the reasons for it. I think we want to ensure that the work we're delivering here is quality work, and I'm certainly conscious by briefing number 3, as we're approaching 5 o'clock, members' mental capacity to continue to receive evidence and engage with it meaningfully is diminished. So that would be my approach going forward. And then finally, to just check in with members around our informal briefings on Tuesday mornings. If members are content to continue with those, there is no perfect time to do these, but clearly when the assembly is actually sitting, our chances of getting anybody in the room are low. I would suggest Tuesday mornings remain a good option, but it is with that heavy caveat: for some members it does not work with their schedule, and that will always be communicated to the witnesses. So if members are content. We have a lot of evidence to get through, and we'll never do it in the formal sittings in entirety. Where I think we have the privilege of sitting on a committee where the public have a really big appetite to engage with us, and we should see that as a positive. I think,
Chair, for most of us, if someone particularly wants to engage with us and we're not able to make that particular Tuesday, if they reach out, most of us will be forthcoming and trying to arrange a meeting with them or whatever.
And John, I trust the clerk's been in touch with you around those informal briefings, and you know that structure. Yeah. Okay. Item 5, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations they wish to make on any items on the agenda today? If anything arises as the meeting progresses, please do note that.
Yes, the usual one, Chair, of my wife being a Board of Governors member at Mitchell House and Grosvenor Grammar.
Okay, well, thanks for noting. I mean, I'm happy to assume anything that's on the register of interest is noted, but if something specifically on the agenda should arise, please do highlight it. Okay, that takes us to item 6 on the agenda. Can I check if the witnesses are here for that? So we have an oral briefing by the Northern Ireland Teaching Council. So I would refer members to a briefing note from the committee clerk, page 16 of your packs, and a Hansard briefing from a previous evidence session with the NAHT on the 28th of May 2025 at page 18. So we'll bring the witnesses through, and then we'll begin. So as members are coming, witnesses are coming through, purpose today is to receive an update from the unions on issues of priority to their membership, and also specifically, as we have the department in on this issue, no doubt the issues around the strengthening inspection legislation from the department will be covered. So while witnesses are getting seated, I'll just run through our attendees. We have Mark McTaggart, the Northern Secretary of the Irish National Teachers Organisation. We have Jacquie Whyte from the Ulster Teachers Union. We have Justin McCamphill from the NSUET. Pauline Buchanan, Regional Secretary of the NEU, who I believe is in fact an apology. Have I got that right? Yeah, so Pauline is an apology. And then we have Joanne Whyte, President of the NAHT. So you're all very welcome here, as always. The committee, we do always seek to prioritise our engagement with yourselves, as it's important for us to hear the views of your members to help us inform our deliberations on the education system. So you are very welcome. Format as usual, 10 minutes in terms of any opening presentation, and that is up to 10 minutes, and then we're going to move into question and answer with members. For just for your reference, appreciate it if not necessary for every member of the panel to answer every question. So if you can divide that out, it helps us get through all of the different issues we'll want to discuss. But also, to be clear, we'll in the main be keeping each inquiry from a member to 5 minutes. So if I could ask to make sure that both in our questions we cut out preambles as far as possible, and in answers we get to the nub of the issue as quickly as we can. Okay, so on that basis, over to yourselves.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to the committee. Not waste too much time on the preambles, so I'll hand you over to Jacquie first.
Okay, I'm up first, obviously. Okay, I suppose it doesn't come as any surprise, and thank you for your time. It doesn't come as any surprise that one of the issues that we're raising is to do with the SEN issue. And I know that there was particular interest in this at the end of last term, if you like, and that there was a suggestion maybe of looking at this more in depth this term. But I think that it's such a huge issue that I'm mindful of time, Chair. I'm just actually going to pick up on a couple of issues within that. The first one being about the allocation of school places, which I think has been causing us all an awful lot of angst. There were comments made, and I think I wanted to address that, comments made at the end of June, actually to yourselves, about the reluctance of schools to take children with SEN. And that I felt that was misleading, because if there's any reluctance, the reluctance was around the difficulties around support and accommodation and those kinds of things, that schools were saying, I don't know if I can accommodate this, I don't know if I can meet these children's needs, those kinds of things. I feel that the Education Authority, and I will come on to that, because the Education Authority are doing, in my opinion, they're doing the best they can with the resource that they have. But nonetheless, they were saying that the support closed around the school, that the support was there whenever the children moved into place. And that isn't necessarily the experience of members on the ground. And when we look at the recent numbers, I mean, we have those children placed. Technically, we have them placed. We have 80 of them who still wouldn't be in full-time education now. It sort of stands to reason that whenever they moved from a figure of about 160 down to apparently 0 now in terms of children who are not placed, there's just no way that the accommodation and the resource and the recruitment and everything has been fed through. So it is a big concern for us. Our teachers and our school leaders are working extremely hard to try to rise to the occasion, to try to put something in place for those children. But I think the main point that we'll make is that we said this time last year, that it's now that we should be starting to put something in place for those children who will be coming into the system, who apparently are known to the system, or at least should be known to the system. And that process didn't really start last year in any meaningful way until too late in the year, and we ended up where we are all over again. That was one thing that I wanted to raise. The other thing was in terms of the SEN transformation programme that's starting to roll out. We did have a presentation last week from the department, and we are aware that the bulk of the money really only was confirmed on the 29th of August, I think it was. So therefore it's understandable that there would be plans in place, but we wouldn't have moved forward. But one of the things, I'm just going to pick one thing out, one of the things that was presented as being up and running and, you know, well underway were the local impact teams. And that being well underway is not actually the experience of those staff who are in those local impact teams. And I can tell from the nodding heads that I'm teaching my granny to suck eggs here. But there seem to be difficulties. The money has come through as of the 29th of August. We know how many teachers we need or staff to make those teams work. We know that each of those teams has to have a specialist from each of the areas, and the idea being that the child is referred to the team and the team then close round the child. But we have got gaps in those teams. We have had recruitment frozen. We have recruitment reopened, but only for half of the staff that they need. So they, open for 24 and they need another 27 or whatever on top of that. We don't have children placed with those teams. We don't have opportunities for those teams to actually become a team. There haven't been opportunities put in place for them to meet, for them to work their way through. Apparently there are new processes, paperwork, all of those sorts of things. And the reason that I'm focusing in on the lit teams is because we have always said that the SEN transformation programme would be fabulous if we could have all of that tomorrow. It would be amazing for all of those children. We can't have all of that tomorrow because the funding's really limited. So what we need to do, and what we've always said, is that you pick two things, for example, that are going to have the maximum impact for the greater number of children. Focus in on them and get them right. And we were told by the department that we have one chance to get this right, and I am concerned that if this is how we're trying to make it right, it's going to be a wee bit of a problem, because those lit teams, the idea is very good, you've the expertise there, could work very, very well, and rather than prioritise them, get them up and running properly, take a pause, get them sorted and move on to the next thing, there is that feeling that they're being cobbled together a bit and sold as up and running, and other things are happening at the same time. So look, we see the issues, we see the change in population. I suppose there's a whole other conversation to be had as to whether we have to look at the whole thing and the whole system as a whole. Whenever you've got those proportions of children, is the system suiting our school population anymore in its current form? But we need to make sure that we're not running before we can walk. We need to make sure that what we're putting in is solidified and embedded and is working for those children before we're moving on to the next thing. So I'll leave it there. It's just an opener for conversation. I'm sure we'll have a lot more discussions moving forward.
That's a good starting point for SEN transformation. So not sure who's coming in next. So Mark next. Just draw attention to time to keep remarks succinct, so we can get to questions.
Just very quickly, I'm going to talk first of all about the governance of schools, and it's a timely point to be making now with the reconstitution of boards of governors going forward. We have major concerns with the training that the governors are receiving in terms of their role within schools, and the uptake in terms of the training that they take. Every governor is supposed to go through the safeguarding training and things like that. Our understanding and what we're seeing is at certain times they're not. The other thing, one thing which we have asked for, is that the governors are trained in the TNC, the Teachers Negotiating Committee's policies, the ones that are extant in all schools, so that they have an understanding of what their role is in it and the role of the staff within it and what they're for. Because what we sometimes find in terms of governors who are either have a legal background or have a HR background, they will bring that experience in terms of outside of teaching, the terms and conditions for people outside of teachers, rather than the teachers' terms and conditions. And it can cause problems, and it can cause obstacles for things being agreed and things being moved forward. The other issue with, and it's something which governors need to be more aware of, the governors aren't there just to challenge and support the principal of the school. That they're to challenge and support teachers in the school as well. And we often find that there's a danger of a them and us in terms of moving things forward. That governors, and rightly, they do defend their principles, but at some stage they have to be aware that they're there for principals and for teachers. It's not just, their role isn't just to protect principals or to be somebody there for principals. So it's an issue around the training that the governors are taking on themselves. Look, I understand how difficult it is now to find governors, and I know it's a voluntary position, but they volunteer to do it. And the thing that they have to realise is when they take on that role, they take on the responsibilities of an employer, and those things, and it's an employer of every member of staff within the school. So, really, we're looking to have the training looked at to make sure that it is fit for purpose. I've said this before. The other thing that we have in terms of governance is it's very difficult for a principal or a teacher to challenge the governors in terms of when they feel something has been done to them. There's no, you can't use a simple grievance against governors. You have to use the bullying and harassment, and it's the Annex C of the bullying and harassment. And the problem we have with that is it finishes with the Board of Governors. There's no independent part to it. So you have no way, if you're not happy, it goes to a subcommittee of the Board of Governors, and then the subcommittee of the same Board of Governors checks that out, and that's where it finishes. You can't take it any further. So it's something which we feel needs to be, it's part of the discipline policy and things like that, and all of the policies that have to be reviewed to allow that to happen, to allow that there would be a standalone grievance that a teacher or governor, or a teacher or school leader could take against the governors. Then the only other thing then, in terms of the work that the ETI has been doing before we move on to the ministers' move against trade unions in terms of the ETI, we are now in a position where we have an ETI which is, in our opinion, fit for purpose, and an inspection process which is fit for purpose. And the reason we feel it's fit for purpose is because it was agreed with us, with the teachers. So it's not being done to the teachers, it's being done with the teachers, and the teachers have had a buy into it. And it has moved away from, you have to have you have to have a huge amount of information to give to the governors or to the Inspectorate. The Inspectorate are now setting out what they want, and that's all that they will look at. So there's not the problem in the past with the past regime of the Inspectorate was there was a huge amount of workload which was coming directly from the inspectors, or in some cases school leaders were using the inspectors as a big stick and say we have to have this, we have to have this. The new inspection process has moved away from that, and it is seen as something which is there to support the schools moving forward. And I mean, from that point of view, in terms of us taking industrial action against the Inspectorate, there would be less reason, in our opinion. The reason we took industrial action against the Inspectorate in the past was because of the regime that was in there in the past, because they were adding to the workload issue. This new inspection isn't adding to the workload for many schools. Joanne?
Thanks very much for allowing me to be here.
I could say that Jacquie and Mark have used all your time, but I will let you come in. So
be quick. I'm going to read.
I'm only joking. We do need to hear from you, absolutely.
I'm here to talk about school funding. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here today. Our system of school funding is inadequate and inequitable. It is no longer based on need, it is based on a very outdated system of free school meals entitlement. Research done by Nicola and Queen's University show that 41% of children who are living in poverty don't qualify for free school meals. Many working families are also struggling above the threshold. Our whole school fund is based around this very flawed indicator. The impact that it has on our schools, some schools are now facing staffing costs that exceed 100% of their school budget. Primary CENCOs manage caseloads of 30 plus children with minimal, if any, release time. Schools can't afford subject specialist teaching for foundation subjects, and essential services are rationed based on school demographics rather than pupil need. Now, we've seen what works in the past. The Engage programme, for example, demonstrated that when school leaders are trusted with the autonomy of the money and given adequate resources, they can produce some fantastic outcomes for the children in their schools. The Outdoor Learning Fund as well showed that equitable distribution around all the pupils benefited all the pupils and not just a selected few. These models show that better approaches are possible and they have been used in the past, and they also deliver better value for money. The Common Funding Formula review is fantastic. We have been hoping for that for a long time. We're hoping that the outcomes of that will remove these outdated funding models, which makes school leaders have to ration out essential services based on what they can afford. Secondly, we hope that adequate baseline funding will be established for all schools for all children, and that we can learn from the Engage model and have a system moving forward that trusts the judgment of the leaders in the schools and their governors. We just want to say that whilst we are supportive of the review, we also think that it is just really tinkering with the symptoms of complete inadequate funding in our school systems. We do think that a fairer distribution of not enough money is still not going to be enough. Recent analysis show that Northern Ireland faces an education funding gap of over 300 million. With schools reporting staffing costs exceeding their budgets, we need substantial investment, not just reallocation of that money. We estimate that to bring Northern Ireland in line with comparable jurisdictions, between 200 and 250 million extra per year would be needed. And that's just to bring us in line with other jurisdictions. That's not to say that that'll make it perfect and wonderful. Really what we're saying is this funding crisis is not inevitable. It's the result of political choices made by all parties over many years. We are looking for our political leaders to have courage and increase and fight for the overall education funding package. Only you guys can make that happen. We can't continue to manage decline or redistribute inadequate resources. Our children deserve better, and so do our school leaders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add a few things, and I'll be brief. And I want to start off with saying there are some positive things the Minister's done, maybe not in the last 24 hours, but it's probably worth pointing out that a lot of the developments around the curriculum, for example, even though maybe how it's initially packaged might make some teachers sit back, I think there's been good work done in terms of Lucy Crehan's report and in terms of the engagement with unions, and I think that review is long overdue. The issue, of course, for teachers will be, well, then how you assess that curriculum, and I think there is an issue then around with the AI, etc., how we assess young people, and I think that's going to be something that's going to keep evolving over the next few years, and certainly that area around assessment has been something that teachers certainly have been engaged in industrial action before, and it's not quite there yet. Largely I'm here to talk about then the outworkings of the agreement, just to say we reached our agreement last year eventually. We have 26 recommendations that are starting to be progressed. There are going to be challenges, and the one thing I would say is, without getting into the detail, at some point we are going to need resources to help implement the outworkings of these. The independent review set up, again, it will come out with recommendations. No point in just having recommendations sitting on the table. We're going to have to meet the challenge of actually getting them in place. And maybe just adding on the funding review, I think it's important that the work's happening, but I don't think we should prejudge what the outcome should be, because it has to remain a priority of government in terms of reducing the gap between the better off and the less well off.
Thank you. Thank you all for your contributions there. And as always, there's probably more issues on the agenda than you would ever have time to cover. But thank you for giving us that overview of where things are at. I'll just maybe note at the outset, in terms of declaration of interest, given some of the issues raised, I am a governor in a local controlled primary school, so she just put that on the record before we go any further with that. So I wanted to just firstly pick up with Jacquie around special educational needs, and I've no doubt the views of your members, we would hope, would be feeding into the sort of wider inquiry into special educational needs that we will be undertaking. But you've highlighted particular issues just around this transformation agenda, and you've highlighted the local impact teams as sort of, if this is the first intervention, that you have some concerns around whether that is ready to go. Can I just, and maybe I don't want to put you on the spot to sort of solve the problem, but can you outline, in terms of what you hear from your members, what would be the interventions that could be put in place now? If we're talking about, we only get one chance to get this right, and time is ticking on this mandate, I think everyone's aware of that. What would you say would make a real difference for your members in terms of their ability to meet the needs of children with SEN?
I think, just picking up then on what I was saying, because I do think that the local impact teams are a very good idea, but the funding has come in now, as I said earlier, and it seems to be that the every time they need to, right, they know how many people they need, they know what the teams should look like, they know how they should be bringing people together in order to upskill and all of that kind of thing. But even though all of that is known and the money has come in, then a bid has to be made, a business case has to be made for this number of staff, and then a business case has to be made for this number of staff, and there are delays and delays and delays. What we need, with the funding being in, is that we look to see how much it will cost, we get those staff in place, we get the teams trained up, and we get them out there with the children allocated to them. So it's, I think, the aspiration in terms of the LITs is something that I think could have a big impact, because if you're a school and you can refer a child to a team, then the team then of experts can decide what the best intervention is. And we all know that children have got, they have a range of issues. They may have autism, but they may have a communication issue, they may have whatever, and you would have that all there. So it's about, I suppose, getting the funding into the right place and getting those basic things built up.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth. If I've understood you correctly, if we're going to lead on LITs, if that's the big sort of number one intervention, then make sure they're actually established, resourced and ready to go. Start of the academic year, there's no point coming in with this half ready or half staffed and half resourced.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And that to me would be a good. Now there's some other very good ideas. There are like early assessment centres there, which are a very good idea, but are only going to cater for a very limited number of children. All of those and things like, one of the things I will say actually is the importance of communicating with the staff who are going to be involved in rolling these things out. We've got changes coming down the road in terms of the use of classroom assistants, and it's really important. Mark was saying earlier about the good experience we had with ETI as a teaching workforce, that those things were developed with instead of imposed on. And I think that there's an opportunity there as well, that if we've got the resource, we've got the staff, and we think there's a better way to use them, work with them to develop what that better way would be. Just slight change in focus.
That's really helpful. Look, Peter and I had an exchange on this in the chamber during a debate this week around the funding for the delivery plan. So far, really, the Minister has set out it's going to cost about 500 million, so it's really
570.
Yeah, exactly, really expensive, and that's really all we've got. From your perspective, in terms of trying to help inform the EA and the department about what would really be impactful for schools and for teachers working in the system, would it be helpful to have those costs broken down? Well, actually, to deliver the LITs would cost this, to do those early interventions would cost this, so that we can actually say, well, we don't have £575 million, so what are the right actions that we can do now?
Well,
would that be helpful?
That's exactly it. I mean, if, as I said at the outset, if we had all of those things and the money for all of those things, that would be amazing. It would be amazing. But we know that we don't. So therefore, if we break it down and we're honest about what we actually have in this period of time, and then work along with those who are working in the field to say, well, what is the biggest bang for our buck with that amount of money? And move it forward in that way, because it's presented to us as an entire programme. And quite rightly, DE, you're saying, whenever we present this to school leaders, they're saying, this is great, of course it is, but you can't have all of that overnight. So we need to be breaking it down and putting in meaningful things, and then we can build on that as we move forward and perhaps access more money.
And I don't underestimate the extent to which, we all know the system is all connected, and if you don't do one thing, it has a knock-on effect. So I'm not saying it's as simple as we'll just do one or two things.
No.
But I'm pretty sure that there are pilots and tests of different things in there that maybe when we're in crisis mode could be parked, and we could get the services, the transformed, better, improved services in where we need them. That would be my view. I have a slight concern that if you constantly pitch something at the highest level, it's 570 odd million. I didn't get 570 million, so nobody backed me. I can't deliver anything. It's that to me doesn't feel good enough. We've got to be looking at, okay, there's, with the money we have, where are those key interventions? No doubt we'll hear on saying in more detail as we go through our evidence, and I think particularly how that placement process works out in schools would be good to hear your views. I just wanted to ask on the inspections issue, because we do have the department in on that, to hear a little bit more about your views on the proposed legislation. You highlighted very positively the good work between teachers and yourselves and the ETI. Do you have concerns about this proposed legislation in terms of it potentially impacting that positive atmosphere that you've described?
Yeah, and it's not just the atmosphere with ETI, because teachers out there maybe won't know until the inspection teams come in, and even with the best will in the world, everyone will have different experiences. Teachers are looking at what's happening in the wider picture. We only got our agreement back in April. They're only really seeing things incrementally changing. It's not a big change overnight. Things are going to be progressing over the next 12 months. We need to keep building the confidence. We have the independent reviews going to report hopefully in November on workload, and again there will be outworkings from it. So I think the focus needs to be keep building that confidence. We committed, I'm not saying we tied our own hands, but we are committed to this. We're committed to getting another round of pay talks soon, getting that resolved in January, and we want to keep going in the trajectory we're going of keeping building those positive relationships. I just think to bring in the legislation now is a red flag to the members.
I think I'd want to put on record, I think it's absolutely vital we do have an inspection regime that works. We need clear accountability mechanisms in the system. Schools receive huge amounts of public money, and there should be accountability, and there have been issues with action short of strike have had an impact on education. I'm not going to try and downplay that, but I do have some concerns around the language of criminalisation, and I think given the context you've outlined, that does concern me a little bit. Could I ask you, and this may not be something that you can speak to, have you looked at sort of practice globally around how other jurisdictions deal with inspection and ensure that it's delivered? Is criminalisation the norm across comparable education systems? I know we've had these jurisdictions sort of
only aware of what happens in these two islands.
Yeah, so it's really that's all you can speak to. Well, I might pick that up with the department, because I'd be interested to know what what that looks like. I'll ask one final question then. In terms of, let's use the department's language, strengthening inspection, are there other ways that we can do that don't involve the threat of criminalisation?
I think when they set out originally they had three offers, three things that they could have done. What they could have done this through negotiation with the unions, and said to the unions, right, how can, I mean, we could have gone to our members and looked at from the point of view of inspections, that if we were going to take action against the inspections, it would be because of something that was being done because of the inspections. The reason we took the first industrial action against inspections, because they were the cause of an awful lot of the workload, which is why we went there in the first place. We have a different regime of inspectors at this point. The danger of taking things away from the unions in terms of what they can or can't do in terms of industrial action is we would then have to look at something else that we can go to if we need to. And there, I'm not sure that the Minister wants us to be going out to say, right, we have to take strike action. The action short of strike action was to prevent strike action and to limit the effect of our industrial action on pupils. So in terms of that, there were opportunities. As Justin said, we were coming out of a period of industrial action. For the Minister to turn around nearly straight away to go, right, and now we've got a wee agreement, and now I'm going to put the boot back into the unions. It has caused us major issues with our members in terms of why did you accept things now, given that the Minister was going to do this. The Minister has talked about safeguarding issues and all of those things. At no stage did any union stop an inspection where it was a safeguarding inspection. And sorry,
I was also going to add. I mean, like, teachers are concerned too about
just briefly, because I probably need to
about the
bring our
methodology
members in.
used during the consultation. Majority of teachers and parents who responded rejected the proposal, but the department then decided to draw attention to the fact that many households use the same computer, and teachers and parents filled the survey in, and it didn't largely actually change the overall response. But it is concerning if this is going to be the way government departments are going to consult in future. They drew attention to the fact that a union encouraged people to fill it in, encouraged people to fill in the teachers one. Is this what we do for Loughney, for example? Do we start saying, well, those residents in such a village, they told each other to fill it in, so we're going to not count them? It's not the way to be going, and it does raise concerns around how data is used if people think their IP addresses are going to be monitored in that way. You certainly take out duplicate respondees, everyone does that, but actually comparing between the different data sets raises concerns.
Yeah, I think that raised more than a few eyebrows, and I have no doubt that will be highlighted with the department today. David, you'd asked to come in. Ordinarily be bringing the Deputy Chair, and is it just for quick comments?
I'm happy to wait after the Deputy Chair. I was just trying to indicate to be on the list.
No, that's fine. No, after the Deputy Chair, I'll bring people in. So, Deputy Chair, over to you.
Okay, you changed the rules that we had to wait.
No, that is, you're right.
This was your proposal.
It was just something was said, came into my head, and it was just like, so my bad. Fair enough.
Change it back. Bring David.
Thanks, Chair. And just on that last point, Justin, on the tracking of IP addresses. So you had a situation where two people on the same IP address made a contribution to the consultation. One of them may have been a teacher, the other may have been someone entirely different. Mm-hmm. And so their contribution was effectively being thrown to the side.
Even if they were the same person, a teacher who's also a parent can fill it in. A DE official who's also a parent can fill it in, and no doubt did.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, if there were DE officials, were their IP addresses tracked in the same way?
That's what we need to track. Yeah. Did anyone fill it in from Rathgale House?
I suppose that's something we can take up with officials when they're in it. But I mean, I have no knowledge of any other consultation where IP addresses were tracked in this way. I could be entirely wrong, but I don't know of any, and I haven't spoken to anybody yet who is aware of something like that happening. Anyway, we can deal with that with the officials when they're in. Jacquie, I just wanted to come in on the SEN issue and the issue around some schools not being willing to set up specialist provision classes. And we understand that. First of all, we know there are schools that don't have the capacity. Secondly, we know that there are schools who have been banging on for a long time to get basic repairs carried out in their schools, and they can't get it. And they're afraid then if they set up a specialist provision class, they're not going to get the support they need to sustain that class. And that's understandable also. However, one of the issues that has been raised, and it came up just before the recess in a committee meeting with officials from the EA, that grammar schools hadn't even been asked. It wasn't that they refused, they hadn't even been asked about setting up specialist provision. And if you look at the data on where the specialist provision classes are in primary schools, they're largely in schools in disadvantaged and deprived areas, the schools that have the highest numbers of free school meals, the highest numbers of newcomer children, and so on. So, would you like to comment on that?
Well, actually, I watched that meeting in June of the committee, and I hadn't actually stopped to consider which schools had been. I mean, there was a general call, and I also know, just on a slightly side point, and I know that some people feel it quite strongly, there are also a number of schools, there's another category, there are a number of schools who have made offers to have special provision, but their schools not in the area where the children are. And I think very often those school leaders feel a wee bit rankled because they have made the offer and that doesn't seem to be acknowledged. I'm just throwing that in there on their behalf.
But that really shouldn't exclude a school, because we have been talking to one principal in West Belfast who has a child being taxied from Downpatrick to his school. So this notion that all these kids are going to their local school or the school closest, I mean, imagine many schools are being passed on the way from Downpatrick to Belfast.
Yeah. And I think the movement generally, and we have had a few bumps in the road actually recently with the I'm not going to go into the integration question and that kind of thing, but we are moving towards inclusion. You know, we're trying to move towards an inclusive education system. And from that point of view, I was actually quite, as I say, I hadn't given it any thought until it came up about the fact that grammar schools potentially hadn't been considered. Because to me, there should be a community in a town, there should be a need in a town for all sorts of provision in terms of the young people. And therefore, I mean, a lot of our children who have additional needs are very highly educated, very capable, very bright children, you know, if you're looking at it in terms of academic achievement. And therefore having some sort of special provision that caters for their additional needs in a grammar school setting isn't beyond what, you know, what you would think of.
There's no argument that there are some children with special needs in grammar schools, and it's those children who are high performing. But the issue of specialist provision is largely that it's separate from the main school. There's no real crossover as such. There's no crossover of staff and so on. So it's not as if the presence of specialist provision in a grammar school is in some way, you know, degrading or decreasing the reputation of a school.
Although,
that's for a brief final comment on this point.
So just to be clear though, there will be, if you ask the department, they will say there are grammars. Of course it's the selective grammars that really we're talking about. But there will be crossover in post-primary where there is a SPIM. Children may well be for maths and English and other core subjects, but then there will be integration through the school in other subjects. Now a lot of that may depend on the needs of the child and whether they can be met, but that is happening.
Okay, fair enough. And just final point on the Minister's proposed legislation on the inspection process and criminalising teachers if they don't cooperate. How do your own members feel about that? What's the view within the different unions?
It's angry, you know. There's very much, it's the one thing when they meet me that's what they want to start talking about first.
Is it seen as an attack on workers' rights. in
It
terms
is
of-
because they're seeing it as a way of restricting unions to take action, and I think the preferred solution, as Mark said earlier, would have been to actually reach agreement between unions and the department to at least try that first.
I think though one of the
Final point, and then I'll
yeah,
close
one of the other issues around it is that it's mixed messaging, because the Transform Ed is talking about building a confident workforce, raising the value of the profession, that kind of thing, and then we have been, as Mark referenced earlier, doing an awful lot of work with the ETI to try to build confidence in this new inspection regime and culture, because you don't have experience of it until the ETI come to your door. ETI have made themselves very available in terms of speaking to members, speaking to different schools and so on. And we're trying to do all of that, building that culture, and then all of a sudden it's, but you will be punished. And the messaging then, that knocked what I think we were all trying to do, the journey that we were trying to go on, because if you're going to get people to buy in, and if you're going to raise their confidence, and if you're going to raise the value of the profession and so on, then the last thing you need is for them to be, punished, beaten with a big stick about something. Yeah.
I'm gonna draw a line there. Just ask if we can really, when there's
Alright.
more than one person on a panel, it can be hard to manage time. So if we can ask everyone just to really try and keep those answers really to the point. I'm going to open up now for other indications. David, John, Michelle, anyone else who wants to come in after that. So, Danny, okay. David.
And thank you, Chair. And it was me that asked for the change, so I recognise that. I'm out of practice after the summer months. Just, I guess, could establish, are we all agreed that school inspections are a necessary and a necessary part of a modern education system, that is something that we should have in principle?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, but there may doesn't mean there aren't other models, but it's the one we have and the one we have for now, certainly.
Sure. And then turning to the legislation, you've spoken positively of how that had been how the system has been developing since the sort of resolution, but the legislation is obviously problematic to yourselves. Can I ask, are you opposed to the legislation in principle or just in terms of timing? Because a lot of the focus there was in terms of the timing.
No, we're opposed to the legislation in principle. That there's no, in our opinion, there's no need for it. If things are going the way things should go, if there are proper negotiations going on, if the what's needed in education, if the finances are correct and all of those things, there would be no need for us to take action. Okay. Therefore, there's no need for any legislation against us taking action against one specific thing.
I think we all understand how that works. I think there's a particular feeling amongst many people that action sort of strike, particularly as it related to inspections, probably even more damaging at times than strike action, and that's why probably the concern, I would imagine, over that particular aspect. But so those MLAs then that they're sort of arguing that case, but really saying that they don't want it until workload issues are resolved, they're not quite on the same page as you, it's fair to say.
I mean, if the workload issues are resolved and everybody is able to work in the way that they need to, in the best interest of every child, okay, and moving things forward.
Even if the workload issues were resolved, you wouldn't be in favour, in principle, of that legislation being in place?
Well, there would be no need for it.
But you still wouldn't be in favour of being in place? No. Fair enough.
We don't see any need for it.
And then what is it that's peculiar, I guess, about the Northern Ireland education system, unlike England, Scotland and Wales, that we shouldn't have such legislation?
It hasn't been here in the past. It hasn't. The danger here is
what was different here?
Well, the question I would, how often has it been used?
But something that's an accepted norm in other parts of these islands. Why is it that we in Northern Ireland should not have an inspector?
We do have lots of things that can be peculiar to us. And look, I know we're talking about the theory, but the practical reality is you may at some point wish to get this through, but I still say doing it now is absolutely the wrong move. We could still debate the rights and wrongs of it, but doing it now is not the thing to do, because people are in the position where we're just getting things settled, and it may be that we get to the position where if we settled everything, the legislation wouldn't be needed.
Well, it may not be, but we've just agreed that inspection is a necessary part of a modern education system. Mm-hmm. So why then would it be that it should be on a voluntary basis?
Well,
what would be the possible reason for schools wanting to opt out of that?
Would it not be better if you could get teacher unions to agree to it, and then you can say it's part of the terms and conditions of teachers? Sit down and let's have the conversation.
That might be useful leverage for yourselves, but I don't think that's the business of the department to try and engineer a system where you have levers that can be pulled for your leverage, particularly whenever it's levers that can be so damaging and corrosive to the education system and for our children. I think that's something that really needs to be considered. I mean, I don't think we would be in favour of voluntary inspection of care homes or nursing homes, for example.
But could we not look at this the other way round? I mean, why can we not actually lead the way in terms of the relationships that are built up in the education system? I mean, your teachers and your school leaders are fundamental. If we had a system that we all valued each other and that we were actually working towards,
you'd say why don't we catch up with other areas in terms of the standard of checks and balances in that to ensure that our schools are performing at the level they should be. This is not about saying that we think a vast number of schools should be targeted anyway. This is about if there are failings or things that we can work with schools to raise them to a certain standard, we can do that. It's a positive thing. I think we've said that. Where this works well, it should be positive for everyone. I just don't understand the logic that says it should then be voluntary.
Short on time, just a final response to David's point.
Yeah, that's kind of convoluting various things. I mean, I think our education system has shown against a number of markers right across the islands that we do extremely well.
And nothing to fear.
Yeah, but why then do we need something? We
just said we need inspection.
Punitive?
We agreed.
No, the legislation. I'm saying, not the inspection. I'm all for accountability. I mean, our children come at the centre of this. There's a lot of public money. There's a lot of there is accountability if you have got the system working together with the functioning, supportive ETI, which we have moved towards and which we have shaped along with the teaching profession. So what we need...
I share that ambition. It can be underlined by legislation, I feel. But I don't... I share the ambition.
Over time, I think points have been clearly made. John, you were next.
Yeah, there's two things: the inspection issue, and then something I'm very interested in is the grievance regime, bullying harassment regime. Just because I have a bit of background in disciplinary processes across different professions, so I'll deal with the inspection issue first, just to clarify the issue. And it's a similar point that we just heard about: is this a matter of principle, or is it timing and optics and how it affects negotiation and morale? I just want to separate those two issues out. Is there any point where you would, in principle, support legislation, like of which the Minister is proposing, that there is a legal consequence for strike action or action short of strike during an inspection? Is there any circumstance where you would support that?
I think that's very difficult to say to unions representing members. Would you ever agree that there could be a sanction to your members? I think as legislators you're going to have to weigh those things up. The main point we're making is that certainly the timing's wrong, but as far as teachers are concerned, we've lasted this long in education in Northern Ireland for over 100 years now without this legislation.
Okay. I need to really, because I'm none the wiser of that, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. Is anyone able to say that in principle, if the conditions were right, pay conditions, workload, they would support legislation that protected inspections?
I can't see any union agreeing to that.
Very useful for the committee to have established that. So the issues of timings and optics really are irrelevant to the principle. Okay, they're an added thing. So let's just. I just mention
Just sorry, I'll give you for there's some interference with
Yes,
the
there's
device
something.
around here. I don't know whose it is. I don't know if it's maybe with the microphone, if we can maybe move it away. It's certainly coming from over there, and that's okay. But no, but back to you, John. Apologies.
Okay, I think that was really useful. The second is on, can I just make an observation? The phrase criminalisation I think is unhelpful. When I drive home today, I have to follow certain rules. I'll put my seatbelt on. My car's going to be MOT'd. It's not criminalisation of my rights to drive on the road. It is simply the legal framework upon which we operate. So we could describe everything as criminalisation if we have a legal consequence of it. And I just want to say the language is really important. The next thing I want to say is this. Again, when we talk about criminalisation of teachers bringing some consequence, how many prosecutions have been brought in England, Scotland and Wales against teachers for blocking inspections?
We know the answer is zero because the authorities over there have been able to use the big stick of potential criminalisation if you don't. And that there was a school in England after the death of Ruth Perry were going to not cooperate, and they were basically told that they would be individually sanctioned.
Okay.
So that's how the fact that nobody has been. But I don't think we use that normally in criminal law. Like how many people are actually convicted before we make something illegal.
Well, if the law is designed,
if it's there to act as a deterrent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my speciality. I've had a lot of background in law and 2 master's degrees, and one of the purposes of, and it's not just pointing out you've expertise, and so there's a fusion. I know we're getting laughing from one member, but there's a fusion of expertise that's very useful in teasing out these issues. One of the purposes of bringing in legislation is actually preventative as opposed to catch people. So it would seem to me that it is entirely reasonable to say that if it has been effective in preventing action short of strike during inspections and actually hasn't criminalised anyone. So I just think we can reframe our entire language. So there's 2 points I just want to bring out here. One, there's no circumstances in which you would back the principle of inspection being protected by legislation. And second of all, that nobody's actually been prosecuted in England, Scotland and Wales. Third point on that is you mentioned, in fact, I'll just move on to if we're happy, to the...
Very long
Sorry,
question.
could
I just think in terms of your own time, if you want to, you mentioned there was governance issues, but it's just for your own time, just to make sure you cover everything you want to get through.
Just as a newbie, maybe I'm just needing to learn that, but that's fine. No, thank you so much.
Could I just make the point, though, that it may well, throughout the different jurisdictions, have been preventative in terms of everybody had to take part in inspections. It doesn't mean that it created a supportive environment. It doesn't mean that there weren't teachers and staff who were seriously damaged, in some cases seriously damaged, by the whole process. So preventative, you're just meaning it prevents you from not engaging, but that doesn't actually create necessarily a process and an interplay between an inspectorate and a school that actually causes, raises the standards for children. There are all sorts of problems that have been cited by colleagues through Ofsted, and a lot of impact on people's physical and mental health and so on, which was where our process started whenever we had a difficult regime. And it's all about working together in the interests of those children to have a system where we all play our part in order to make sure that things are moved forward. And just saying that if a system is potentially not fit for purpose, but the legislation means that it's preventative because you have to take part in it anyway. We should be looking at what are we trying to achieve through all of these things working together and move it forward.
Going to let John come in just because he's short of time for a final comment, and then we'll move on.
But in the evidence, I think it was Mark who said that actually we're now much more content with the ETI regime.
Yeah, which is why we don't need the legislation.
So it would seem to me that was the apt time to actually, once you have an inspection process you're content with in principle, then we say, okay, well then we move to the fact that if anybody does disrupt that inspection process, that there would be consequences.
We're happy with it in theory. We still need to see the
Final
practice in
comment, then end of
schools,
inquiry.
and that's what we need to build the confidence on. We need ETI in there.
Bring it to a close because we're well
you
over
wouldn't
time.
support inspection
John,
under any
so we're well over
time.
time on that. Michelle, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for your time today. Jacquie, you talked about the crisis in Send, and obviously that is something that's such a high priority for us, and we had our motion this week in the Assembly. I want to take you back to the placements issue in terms of what the department is doing right now, and your understanding to actually deal with this for 2026. And if you're aware of anything, if you're not, what do you feel would be the ideal process? Obviously, we know what has been done so far has been a little more ad hoc than we would like. There's always a crisis at the end of the year, as we saw again in June last year. So how do you feel perhaps the department could do better in getting ahead of that?
Well, I have to say, we have to work on the assumption that, and Joanne, maybe you want to come in because you have a background, and I'm just past, Joanne has a background in special ed. Possibly, just to give her an opportunity.
I was just going to say that the Education Authority and the department already know the numbers for next year. So here we are in not quite the middle of September. We already know where the shortfall is going to be next year, and this kind of addresses what Pat was saying about the schools and the SPIMS as well. In that, why are schools not being approached now? Why is it the wrong way round? For example, as a principal of a school, if someone came to me and said, next September, Joanne, I would like you to have this in place. Here's the money to do it. Here's the spec for the staff you're going to need. You've got between now and February or March to appoint those people, to go through the process, to make sure those people have all the training that they need, and that the support services will be in to work with the rest of your staff as well to make sure everyone is up to speed for this happening in September 26. Part of the, I don't like the word reluctance, but I'll go with that word. Part of the reluctance of schools opening SPIMS and agreeing to SPIMS is that they are approached at the end of May, start of June, and are told that it needs to be up and running for the start of September. And when they have it sorted and staffed and resourced, then they will get this amount of money. And I just need to say, in my own personal experience, that bit of money doesn't come. So the extra that you have spent has come out of what was your original budget. It's not in any way that schools are reluctant. It is that they, based on their own experience, they feel that it is too rushed. Every school thrives on success of every pupil. You know, if it's set up correctly, if it's staffed appropriately, if it's resourced appropriately, if it's supported appropriately, the school will love to bask in the success of those children and that provision that they have provided in their school. It's just the wrong way round. So in answer to your question, if there's 100, 1,000 and 1,600 additional places needed for next June, schools need to be approached now. Conversations with governors need to happen now. The resourcing needs to be given to those schools now so that they, in a timely manner, staff it, resource it, and have the room set up and feel that they are ready for those children coming in September.
So what you've described seems completely logical in terms of an approach. So what's your assessment of why that logical approach is not happening right now?
I think it comes back to the funding thing again. I mean, I know from experience that the funding doesn't come, or it comes months after the school have already had the payout, and then they're in trouble for being, over budget, etc. I don't know, in answer to your question, why it doesn't happen now. I kind of guess it is a logical thing, and maybe that's why it doesn't happen now. I don't know.
I want to follow up with that quickly on the kids then who have a place and who then actually can't access that place. A number of them are in what's called contingency arrangements. What is your understanding of that, the impact on those kids and even the impact on teachers? Because some of it's like supervised home visits, and I just had some feedback that teachers find it difficult. They find it awful to watch a child not get access to the curriculum as they should. They find that a struggle. What is your experience of how teachers are experiencing dealing with kids in those kind of contingency arrangements?
I could just ask for a brief final answer on this one, and I'll put the time on that.
We've had to do that. My normal job is principal of a special school, so we've had to do that. We've done the home visits. We've tried to garner relationships with the families and the children. The children can't access a place wherever because the place isn't available. It isn't appropriate. The parent can't get them there. All those issues. There is no relationship. If a child is in that situation, there is no relationship between them and the Education Authority or the Department of Education. So the teachers have a very difficult job there, and you really are courting the family and the parents. Whether teachers feel equipped and emotionally resilient enough to be able to do that in an unfamiliar environment without the rest of your staff there to support you is a very difficult job. And I think that part of the training, the additional training that teachers should have, should be in around those things of parental engagement and family engagement, because more and more teachers are in that situation where they're trying to garner some kind of relationship with families because the actual placement that would suit that child isn't available.
Draw close to that there. Okay, Danny, you'd indicated this.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. It is a very peculiar place and quite a peculiar meeting so far. See if I just want to focus on saying, just following on what Michelle was saying, a lot of what I'm going to say comes actually from parents, and you know, the children who have been placed but not in that place, and that's gone on for a number of years now, where it feels like to them that it's almost like the buck's being passed from the EA or the department to then the school, and I have represented some of these parents. Then parents don't then want to fight with the school, but they aren't getting any real education. Like, my child's mainstream, my child gets its full allotted hours. These kids were lucky getting 30 minutes, and I brought this up with the EA last year, and they disputed it a bit. But it's hard to get people to come forward, especially when it's then placed against the school. And I'm hoping our mini inquiry will really delve into the weeds here, and it would be helpful to hear that from yourselves, that what is being said in from teachers, because parents feel at their wits' end, and it's placements, it's transport, it's displacement, it's, you know, I'm sorry, I'm just doing this in one long thing of preamble, but it's a lot of questions in it. It's also the fact that their education, when we're saying about inclusive education, working towards it, some of these units, SPIMs, I don't like the word SPIM, but some kids are being placed, and there could be a P2 in the SPIM, and then a P6 or a P7, and I don't see what's inclusive about that. And if that is happening, how much pressure is that putting on our school leaders? Because that's something we really need to look at. And I get the funding side of it. I know some do want to help, but there's also an element of those with the most resources simply aren't helping out, and until they do, I think we're always going to be in this cycle, because we do need funding. The bigger picture, we need more special schools. And this was said to me by a parent who's well tuned in, who would advise other parents and all as well, who's been through the whole system for many years. And it was categorised to me that we're now at a stage where it's special schools on the cheap. I'm sorry, that was more of a thing. There was a lot of wee questions in there, but if there's anything that you could just, I think it will help us going forward, because we want to help the minister. We want to work together. We want it to be better, inclusive for all kids, because it is great to see our children achieving really good grades. But when you look at the weeds, there's more children now failing the education system.
And I think, just picking up on the point you were making about children not having the full-time education, that recent statement from EA then cited that there were 80 children now still not in full-time. But when you think about the fact that at the end of June there were 160 children not placed, and then all the children were placed, by the beginning of September, it stands to sense, apart from the fact that school leaders who are supposed to be getting a break are obviously in there organising things. But I watched this happen with some of the school leaders that we have last year, where they decided they would take, they agreed to take this, but were happy to take the special provision like they were. And actually, this particular school leader that I'm thinking about is opening a second special provision classroom. But I went out to see it in sort of September, October last year, and it was a building site. It was a building site, and they had the children, and they only had 2 or 3 children in at that time because there were health and safety issues as well. And what was going to be the sensory room and the this and the that, everything was locked down, and there were health and safety issues, all sorts of things. Now I was out, I have to say, good news story. I was out in June then, and it's lovely, and a lovely sensory room and so on. But it's back to, I suppose, what Joanne's saying, that needs to start now. That school should have had that building site before those children were due to be arriving in the school. And the schools are trying so hard to make the families feel included and make the families feel, but that's very difficult when you have nowhere to put them and you haven't got the staff and you haven't got, so
has it ever happened in mainstream, like as a parent, like I would never envisage that I would be offered, or my child would be offered, a school place that doesn't exist? It just wouldn't. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't even be a question. It's the norm.
And another issue there that needs to be really teased out, and I don't know if it's a case of pausing and thinking the way I was talking about with the lit teams, but there is a lot about appropriacy of placement. I mean, there are, and I know a child with autism is a child with autism. Everyone is an individual. I'm not, but there are traits around sensory issues. There are traits around, dealing in different ways with noise levels and colour and so on. And we need to be maybe saying, well, this child suits this setting, not just because it's only up the road. And looking at, the number, the different children in the room, and can they all work together? And there is that sense of get them placed and maybe worry about that later. Yeah, like and then when is later, because then we start into the next cycle and we're doing it again. So there's an awful lot to be unpicked. But I will say that, schools are trying their very best, and they are providing, nurturing environments for those children, and they are educating to the best of their ability. They do need the funding, and they do need the support, and they do need the things done in a timely fashion to let them have a chance to get it off the ground properly.
I like time probably for a comment rather than question, if that's no.
Oh no, thank you. I'm hoping the Sane inquiry will really delve into all that. Thank you.
Peter, you'd indicated next.
That's great, thanks Chair, and folks, thanks very much for coming this afternoon. A couple of quick comments and then I'll lead you through a series of really, really tight, short questions. First of all, Jacquie, I'm hoping that, I agree, I hope the lit problems are teething problems, because I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
It's crucial, and I hope we get through that. I'm sure EA are working on it. There are issues, and I hope they're resolved. Second, Mark, encouraged by your comments on inspection, and I know the ETA have changed, and it has changed. I get all that, and I hope we can move through it. Okay, notwithstanding all that, we have agreed this afternoon that inspection is important/crucial to an effective education system, and I assume that you all agree with that. You'd probably all agree as well, you just keep nodding, that ASOS has resulted in, action short of strike has resulted in there being no inspections for the vast majority of the last 10 years. Is that right?
I don't know, it could be half of the time, I'm not sure.
It's a wee bit more. I didn't do the math on it, but I think it's in the majority. And mostly...
But we're not going to concede that it impacted education, given the results that young people in North
No, I'm not. And to be honest, just I get that, I'm not too interested in what's gone before. Right, okay. So most of ASOS was around paying conditions. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. So let me give you a hypothetical. The Education Minister gets his budget next year, gets appointed a budget, and doesn't have enough money for satisfactory pay reward for teachers. Okay, now that's not getting at what that might be. I suppose my question is, that's not his fault. He gets appointed, he gets a budget. You guys all know how this works. What's going to happen in 26, 27? Do you think there could therefore be action short of strike, and we'd be still in a spiral of where there'd be no inspections in schools? And I'll caveat that with saying the vast majority of schools in Northern Ireland are brilliant and have nothing to fear whatsoever from inspection. Okay, I know that, and you guys know that as well. But what we do know is we do need inspection in our schools. So my question really there is, if that theoretical situation happened, the minister got a substandard budget, he didn't get enough money to give teachers the award that they wanted, what's going to happen? That is a question.
Well, we don't see why that should happen. We're on a trajectory to improve things, and I think we need to continue on it, because if we don't, we're going to set ourselves back years, because it's taken us a long time to get us to where we are. Action short of strike, it's going to come down to whatever people can imagine, and removing it necessarily on an inspection team in a school doesn't mean somebody won't come up with something else that equally is annoying to the minister. So that doesn't solve that.
Justin, you're a smart guy. You know that's exactly what could happen next year. And I think the point I am making is we could sit in a spiral of ASOS and no inspections at ASOS.
We don't want that. We want a deal, because
I accept that.
Do you think we have happy lives when we're in the middle of these late night negotiations?
No, but I think everyone, and I have to speak from a parent's perspective, and when I talk to parents, this is really important to them. They are shocked, frankly. Someone when I used to say, well, you get into this sort of discussion, they say, well, the majority of the last 10 years there hasn't been any inspections for a range of reasons. And I'm not want to go into why that was.
But just on that point, how many parents knew it?
Yeah,
how many parents were aware of that schools, that the action short of strike action was stopping inspections? The majority of parents weren't aware of it because it wasn't having a detrimental effect on their kids' education.
No.
If you make that argument, you're getting into territory, Mark, that there's no point in inspections, which
would
be...
No, I'm not saying there's no point in inspections. What I'm saying is you're talking about the parents, they're shocked, and they're shocked because the industrial action that we took, for the most part, had as limited effect on the pupils in the teachers' care as we could put in.
Okay. I have one more question, and so it's in relation to, and I know you guys already commented this week, and that's why I'm asking. It's a quote from the Justice Minister. I know you guys have reacted to the context of it. That's not what I'm asking, but I'll read it out to you, and then I'll ask you a question around it. It's potentially going to have, and the Justice Minister's referring to the Education Minister's decision to remove the trans guidance on the EA website. It's potentially going to have an open season on the bullying of young people, not just by other peers in their class and other members of the same age, but actually by people within their classrooms, their teachers and others. So I'm not going to ask you to comment on the removal of the guidance. What I am going to ask you to comment on is, do you think your members are more likely to bully children in the classroom because the guidance was removed?
I think if you follow that logic, then, if it's trust teachers, we would put it back. Well, why not trust them on inspection? Things can happen. I think maybe Justice Minister could have chosen her words differently, but for us, it's about deeds, not words. And it's the removal of the guidance, the removal of the research work off the department's website is what's causing the damage, not the words, really, of the Minister of Justice. People might say that's Naomi being Naomi, but that's how it is.
Would you agree with what she said, Justin?
Brief final comment, just to be clear on
that. It's not what I would say, no.
It wasn't quite what I asked, but then you're a seasoned campaigner. I mean, so what you're saying is you don't expect, given the guidance is gone, you don't expect your members to be more likely to bully teachers in the classroom?
No, teachers are going to get on with supporting young people they teach. However, at the same time, I do think it was reckless of the Minister to make the comments he did around misgendering young trans people. And I think we do run a risk that some people may decide a very small number, could be a pupil, could be a parent, could be a governor, could be a teacher, may say something for the right or wrong motives that causes immense personal damage to a young person. And that's what we need to be thinking about.
You're out of time. John, I'm going to have to draw a line. I think just
one sentence.
Conscious the department or have been waiting patiently over time here.
I just want to say the comment was made about the EA are working on the LITs. The EA need the money from the department to work on the LITs.
I think it's again, I don't want to open it up, Chair, and I'm happy to take it off base. But I think it's the business cases, Jacquie. Is it a problem with the business cases?
No,
being
but
developed?
I think the thing has been, they know what funding is required. The
Yeah.
money has now come in. The business cases are causing the delays. Get the money in. We know what personnel's needed and get.
I have to draw a line just in the interest of time, because I do still have Kathy to bring in, and the department are waiting way over time here. So Kathy.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for all the information so far. I want to go back just to the lit teams there, Jacquie, briefly. You mentioned there, about how valuable these teams actually could be. We've sort of been back and forth with the EA and the department on what these teams actually look like, what they're going to be. At the outset, we thought there was going to be allied health professionals involved in them. We now know there's not. I have had many conversations with teachers in my area and classroom assistants in my area about the growing complex medical needs that they're dealing with. What's your take on that, or what's your view on how that is impacting teachers and classroom assistants having maybe to administer complex medications? I know of one in particular who's having a child who needs tube fed, and having to administer that. What's your take on those?
This is a huge issue that actually towards the end of last year we have been starting to talk about as an NITC. We have huge concerns about our teachers and school leaders are educators, and that's first and foremost. So therefore, we understand that, it would be our position that they shouldn't be pushed into a position where they have to, they're instructed to carry out any of those medical procedures. Having said that, an awful lot of teachers move along that because they see that that's the way for the child to access education, is to make sure that the medical needs are met. I have huge worries, and I think we all have huge concerns about the protections that are in place in the system for our staff. We have not, thankfully, to date had to deal with something which, we have had teachers who have been, actually in our own union, we have had teachers contacting us where the courses that they've been offered and the training that they've been offered is nursing level quality training, which is not training that you can do over a couple of sessions and then come in. And you're saying about tube feeding, there's catheterisation, there's very invasive procedures. And we have got teaching staff out there where there should be, as you quite rightly say, health professionals. Now, we have heard for a number of years about how we're going to work cross-departmentally and we're going to have health people. And in the meeting we had with the department about the SEND transformation, my understanding from what was said there was simply that the department had been in contact with the Department of Health to see if there would be any capacity or resource or whatever. That seems to be, and I understand the Department of Health haven't got an awful lot of additional resource and funding. But I have huge concerns because with the best will in the world, we tell our teachers that educating is their role, but they rise to the occasion, they rise to the challenges, and they're putting themselves, I feel, in situations which are very, very concerning. We do need to deal with this for the young people. We do, and for the mental health and stress of our own teaching profession, who did not choose that route and did not train for that. And we've asked the questions that we've been discussing amongst ourselves. Does the training that is provided indemnify those teachers? We haven't got we've actually got officials finding out where we get the answer, if you know what I mean, rather than we know where to get the answer. And it's a minefield, and day and daily we have teachers and school leaders moving forward with that. Joanne may want to comment because she's in a special setting, and the teachers in special settings have particular issues there, obviously.
Can I just say, I share your concerns because we had a joint health and education committee meeting, and we were able to find out at that there's no comprehension between the departments as to how many allied health professionals would even be needed within the education system. So that was stark for us. And Joanne, just in the special setting as well, we have the case now where we have special schools that had on-site nurses that have been removed.
Removed, yes.
And unfortunately there has been tragedies in those schools.
Yeah, and we're also in the situation where Health thought they were operating a model of delegation around medical procedures that school staff were doing, but then there is no allied health people in the schools to oversee that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And school staff can be trained in a certain procedure, but that is only for that child.
Yeah.
They can't just, I can peg feed now and peg feed all around them. It's specific training for a specific child. And actually, what is being uncovered, I know that the SLG group are doing a lot of work on this. What is being uncovered is where schools thought they were insured, for want of a better word, to carry out certain things, they're actually not. There's no oversight of that. And if that is happening in special schools where the greatest concentration of children with complex medical needs are, for mainstream schools and specialist units in mainstream schools to have children who require those type of procedures, I would be very concerned about that.
One other
Need to be a very brief final
one other
comment,
aspect I just
really.
want to mention, because I feel they're very often overlooked in these conversations as well, are the Senkos within the school, who are very often teaching, who are in the classroom teaching and trying to juggle this as well. And we had department officials in who had said that the new portal, the referral system, the removal of the educational psychologist was relieving the workload of the Senkos, and the Senkos should actually be relieved. That this is now, I had the same response from the Senkos, my phone was going off.
The Senkos,
I don't think they've
At the time,
noticed.
can I get a quick assessment of that?
Yeah. Your reaction tells me all.
Well, I'll just get one sentence. I think at a previous briefing at one stage, we had said it would be very much our position that schools in this current setting should have a full-time non-teaching Senko. And that would do an awful lot to
I
alleviate
think
the
when
need.
DE tell you that schools asked for it, ask them which schools.
To Jackie's point, any Senkos I speak to, that when they hear that, they say that they would need to change the rule, because who would want to do it, because
Absolutely.
it's so pressured,
So
and that speaks to the level of the problem, I think. Okay, look, I thank you all for your evidence. I know with a big panel and questions on every topic under the sun coming at you, it's difficult to keep to time, so we do appreciate your evidence today, and we'll no doubt hear from you again before too long. So, members, apologies that I've had to be fairly rigid with time there on all of that, but the department officials are probably cursing us out there in terms of how long we've kept them waiting. But thank you all.
They left our members waiting 4 months for a pay rise last night.
We'll pass that on.
Justin, I was going to ask you what jokes you'd share in the workplace and what jokes you'd share in a bar, but I didn't get a chance to. Maybe you'll tell me about those sometime.
Oh, I know.
Just remind members, we are still in public session in the committee. So, members, if we could just wrap that evidence session up. I'm going to suggest there were a few things members may want to follow up, but I assume that a lot of what we've heard will carry over to the next evidence session, so we might review any actions arising at that stage. I'm also conscious that a lot of the evidence heard was in relation to SEN, and we do have our inquiry starting, so it may not be the best use of time to bombard the EA and department with correspondence if we're going to be hearing evidence and all of that, but we can make some decisions on that after the next evidence session. Can I check with members they're content to proceed without a comfort break? I'm happy to facilitate it if needs be. Okay, we're asking for a comfort break, so look, short comfort break. I'll go out and make apologies to the department for that. If we can just move into closed session now, or into turn the live feed up. It was remiss of me at the start not to introduce Lucia Wilson, who is normally the clerk to PAC, but is covering our session today. So I really thank you for giving up your time and being thrown in at the deep end today with probably not too much preparation.
I'm learning a lot.
I'm sure you are. But that thanks on record. It was remiss of me to miss that at the start. Okay, so members, that takes us on to item 7 on your agenda. It's oral briefing from the Department of Education on the School Inspections Bill. I would refer members to a briefing note from the committee clerk, page 30 of your pack, summary of the consultation report on the proposals for the legislation at page 32, briefing paper from the department, that's at page 7 of tabled papers, and a note of a pre-brief from officials in the department that was held with myself as chair at page 15 of tabled papers. So at this point, I'll just say, first of all, thank you for your patience in waiting to come and give evidence today. I know we did run over time, and to just advise who we have attending today. So with us we have Dr. Suzanne Kingon, who is Deputy Secretary of Policy, Delivery and Infrastructure at the Department of Education, Kathryn Menary, School Improvement Team in the Department, Nicola Byrne, Assistant Chief Inspector with ETI, and Barry O'Rourke, Assistant Chief Inspector at ETI. You're all very welcome here today, and we appreciate your time. So we would ask that if you begin the evidence session with any opening remarks or presentation you want to make, if I could ask that be up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into question and answer, and we will try as far as possible to keep each inquiry from a member to in and around the 5-minute mark. So I really would urge members to avoid preambles where possible, and for witnesses to get to the nub of the issue and their response as quickly as possible. And certainly no expectation that every member on the panel will answer every question. That will help us get through. But at this stage, really, over to yourselves.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to brief you today on the Department's intention to bring forward a standalone bill to strengthen the legislative framework governing inspection. This is a vitally important issue, and one that sits at the heart of our shared commitment to ensure that every child in Northern Ireland receives the highest standard of education. Committee have received a written briefing on this topic, so today in my opening remarks I will address 4 main questions. Why do we need inspection? Has inspection operated as intended? Is legislation absolutely necessary? And is this the right time for this legislation? So beginning with why do we need inspection? The Education and Training Inspectorate, through its vision to be the voice of excellence and equity for all learners, champions the rights of children and young people. Without inspection, we have no clear picture of educational effectiveness in individual schools or in our education system as a whole. At the most fundamental level, inspection provides independent assurance to government and to wider society that schools and other educational settings are providing a good standard of education, maintaining a safe and effective learning environment, and meeting all legal requirements. It does so not only by recommending areas of action, but also through an ongoing process of professional dialogue with school staff, and by identifying and sharing best practice to ensure children and young people are having access to high quality learning experiences. Inspection shines a light on what's working well and where improvement is needed, benefiting both teachers and pupils. For teachers, inspection is a mirror and a motivator. It recognises excellence, shares best practice and supports professional growth. Members will note that ETI is the only organisation in Northern Ireland that inspects the arrangements for child protection and wider safeguarding in schools and other educational establishments. Over recent years, ETI has worked extensively to rebuild the trust of education professionals and transform the inspection process, and I think that was acknowledged by trade union colleagues in the previous session. Inspection is not just, as I said, about individual schools. It's about the strength of the entire education system. And ETI plays a vital role in driving system-level improvement by identifying patterns, highlighting best practice and exposing areas of concern. Its insights, for example, through thematic evaluations on issues such as specialist provision, PE, the statutory assessment process, teacher professional learning, inform policy, shape curriculum development and guide professional learning. And the unique aspect of ETI's work and what makes it different from other research and the roles of other organisations is the first-hand observation of practice in the classroom and the understanding of the lived experiences of children and young people in the school. So in short, inspection is the cornerstone of every healthy, accountable and ambitious education system. So has inspection operated as intended in Northern Ireland in recent years? Regrettably, it has not. No less than 3/4 of ETI inspections in the last 8 academic years have been impacted by action short of strike. And just to be clear about what this disruption means in those cases, it means that ETI is unable to provide assurance to parents, carers, school communities and all stakeholders about the quality of education being delivered. It also means that in each and every one of these cases, ETI has been unable to fully evaluate child protection and wider safeguarding arrangements, a core and critical protection for children. As a result of action short of strike, many schools have gone without meaningful inspection and therefore without both the external scrutiny, but importantly the support that is essential to driving improvement to make sure that children are both safe and making progress in their learning. And just to give you some figures around that, this year with the return of inspection, 5 schools were identified as needing external support through the formal intervention process. They were the first schools to enter formal intervention and receive external support since 2017. And by way of comparison, in the 8 academic years before 2017, 80 schools received support. 80 schools. And again, just to be clear, what does it mean when inspection is obstructed or cooperation is withheld? It means there's no classroom observations of teaching and learning. Lesson plans, pupil data, and individual learning materials are not shared. Staff and governors have refused to meet with inspectors, preventing evaluation of their training, awareness, and understanding of key policies. Often, questionnaires have not issued to pupils and parents, and their voice has not been heard. The trade unions have contended that safeguarding was protected during action short of strike, and it's important to provide clarity on what this looked like in practice, because as I noted earlier, ETI is the only organisation that inspects arrangements for child protection. To effectively evaluate child protection and safeguarding, inspectors need to take the views of pupils and parents through pre-inspection questionnaires, to observe classes, to talk to key pastoral staff such as the designated teacher and designated governor, to analyse key pastoral data, talk to pupils and scrutinise key policy documents. Clearly, almost none of this is possible in an inspection impacted by action short of strike. And it is through inspection that ETI identifies organisations where child protection requires improvements. And where inspection is impeded, the risk increases that schools are in need of support are not identified and children are left vulnerable. Only a consistent, unimpeded programme of inspection can provide the necessary assurances that unknown safeguarding issues are being identified and that robust child protection arrangements are in place in our schools. Turning to whether legislation is absolutely necessary to ensure that inspection operates as intended. The Department has reviewed a range of options, and it is clear only fit-for-purpose legislation will remove the ongoing disruption. All efforts at negotiation to have inspection excluded from action short of strike have been unsuccessful, and that includes in January this year, when there were no outstanding areas of disagreement between ETI and the Northern Ireland Teaching Council, and when the new model of inspection had been widely welcomed by stakeholders. Non-cooperation was still a feature of action short of strike. If one union includes action short of strike, includes inspection within that, we've seen time and time again, the others are under pressure immediately to do likewise or lose members in a competitive market. The trade union responses to the recent inspection consultation clearly stated that they objected to any proposal to remove inspection from the arena of industrial action. It has been suggested that the requirement to cooperate with an inspection process could be incorporated into teachers' terms and conditions, rather than taken forward as a standalone piece of legislation. This would simply not work for two key reasons. Firstly, the revised terms and conditions would have to be negotiated and agreed with the relevant trade unions and teachers, who, based on their response to this issue, would robustly resist the introduction of such a clause. Secondly, even if such a clause was introduced into revised terms and conditions and into teachers' contracts, the right of trade union members to take industrial action is protected in law, and when the union has secured a valid mandate through the balloting process, there would still be nothing to preclude teachers from specifying refusal to cooperate with inspection as one of their actions short of strike. As we have seen in recent years, many teachers have taken part in industrial action, even when elements of that action are a specified requirement in their terms and conditions. Quite simply, in any other scenario than this legislation, refusal to participate in inspections will remain a feature of action short of strike. As in every other jurisdiction across the British Isles, the proposed separate statutory requirement is the only realistic and effective solution. We need a legal framework that guarantees consistent, independent oversight of educational quality, child protection and safeguarding. A legal framework for inspection that is fit for purpose and practical. Final question I would like to address today is whether it is the right time for legislation. The honest answer is, if not now, then when? The reality is that for some stakeholders, particularly the teaching unions, there may never be a right time. And I think you heard that in the previous session. The opposition to inspection-related legislation has been consistent and unwavering. So today we have had nearly a decade of disruption, 10 years where inspection has been undermined, 10 years where the system has been held in a state of uncertainty. We do not currently have action short of strike, and there are no outstanding areas of agreement, as I mentioned earlier, between ETI and the NITC, yet inspection will be included in any future action short of strike. Without legislative clarity and protection, we risk another 10 years of disruption. I would also clarify that this legislation will not be in place until 2027 at the earliest. It's not going to be in place immediately. Further delay is not a risk we can afford to take, not for our schools, not for our pupils, or for the integrity of our education system. Some have expressed concerns that this legislation could damage relationships, good, positive working relationships that we know exist between ETI and teachers. ETI exists to inspect. That is its statutory function. Inspection done well is not a threat. It is a cornerstone of quality assurance, improvement and public accountability. There can be no meaningful long-term relationship between ETI and the profession if inspection is continually disrupted, diluted and politicised through industrial action. Relationships built on avoidance are not relationships at all. To be clear, this legislation is not about confrontation. It is about prevention, restoring stability, ensuring consistency and reaffirming the principle that inspection is a non-negotiable part of every high-functioning education system. So to conclude, inspection exists to safeguard educational standards and most importantly to protect children. Northern Ireland remains the only jurisdiction in the UK and Ireland without legislation to protect the integrity of inspection. This is not a technical gap, it is a systematic failure. As I said, 3/4 of all inspections in 8 years have been disrupted by action short of strike. If we accept collectively that inspection is essential, and I believe that we do, then we must ask ourselves, should it be voluntary, and should it function only 1 year in 8? The Department's position is unequivocal. It is no longer acceptable for Northern Ireland to be the only part of these islands where inspection lacks legal protection and where it fails to operate consistently and as intended. An appropriate preventative legal framework is required. Our duty is not to the comfort of the adults in the system, but to the child in the classroom. And we must reject the notion that safeguarding is achieved simply by ensuring adults are content. Safeguarding is not about comfort, it is about vigilance, and inspection is part of that vigilance. So in the coming days, the Minister will write again to executive colleagues, providing a first draft of the bill and seeking urgent agreement to introduce it to the Assembly. Chair, members, this legislation is about protecting children, supporting our teachers, supporting our schools, and ensuring public confidence and information on our education system. The Department looks forward to working with the Committee as this important proposal progresses. And myself and colleagues, of course, welcome questions from committee members. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a start and I'll try and be brief to make sure we don't run over on this session. There was some discussion around the consultation process in the last evidence session, and there was concern raised around the commentary that was provided around the tracking of IP addresses, and there were two different sort of sets of figures presented of if the data was accepted as collected, and then if the data was interpreted with the IP addresses tracked and filtering out those that you believed were double responders. But I've just raised a slight concern that if just because someone lives in the same house, it doesn't mean the same person's responding. Could I just check first of all, is that normal practice in a departmental consultation? Because I've not seen it explicitly referenced in any consultation responses I've dealt with, and I suppose there was just a little bit of concern that there was a sort of an attempt to discredit the responses as not being really worth the time of day.
No, just make a few points on that, Chair, if that's okay. So I suppose just to say at the outset, the Department values the contributions of all stakeholders through the consultation process: teachers, parents, trade unions and others. We carefully reviewed and analysed every single consultation response in detail and spent significant time responding to the points raised. And it is both expected and absolutely appropriate that those individuals who are more directly affected by proposals respond to a consultation in greater numbers. And that's what we would expect to see. That's the norm. But to ensure transparency, we provided both the full data set and a filtered analysis using the IP addresses.
My question was, is that the normal practice? I've not seen it in departmental consultations before.
The piece is, we felt it was appropriate because we had around half of the responses that came from the same IP addresses were the same name and used the NASUWT and other unions' pro forma response. So although it was filled in with a parent, it came from the same IP address with the same name, the same response, and actually spoke as a trade union member. It said things like, we as teachers, us as teachers. So it was quite clear that there was a significant proportion of those responses.
I understand. I suppose the question is just to be clear in the question, is that the normal process in a departmental response that would be broken down to that level of detail? Because I've not seen that before.
I can't answer for other consultations, but I believe it's absolutely appropriate to give a full contextual picture. Different information is given in different consultations about who responded and what groups responded. It's also, just to clarify, Chair, all users of Citizen Space are informed on its privacy notice that their IP addresses are collected, and this information is actually really important, and it is used as a check as normal practice because it helps ensure the integrity of the consultation process against both automated responses but also multiple responses from the same IP address. So the potential where there could be thousands of responses from the same IP address. So it's normed to collect it, it is normed to analyse it. The Department adheres to the highest standards of data protection, and all data protection was adhered to. We believe it gave a fuller and more appropriate contextual picture. Would it have been appropriate for us only to give the figures with the separate IP addresses stripped out? Of course not, but we give the full data set and the contextual data set, and I believe that was absolutely appropriate.
I guess just to note that there was some concern around that, and that, I think all members probably received contact from people who had responded to the consultation, just slightly concerned about it. So just wanted to get on the record there in terms of what the normal practice would be. Can I just check? I want to pick up on the safeguarding point, because I think that's, seems to me very clearly to be at the heart of what you're setting out here around the safeguarding. One of the things that I just wanted to check for my own comfort around the safeguarding regime in our schools would be that if inspection is the only way that we monitor safeguarding, in reality schools are inspected quite infrequently, even in a normal regime. Is there a concern that, I don't know, what would be, well, maybe the first question is, what's a normal time scale for a school to be inspected in a normal regime? How often would they expect an inspection?
When it comes to the inspection of safeguarding, it's not just carried out through formal inspection. We have district inspectors so our statutory duty is monitoring, inspecting and reporting on. So that monitoring piece is an important piece for us. So we can do that through part of our district work.
That's happening on a rolling basis?
Not during action short of strike.
Yeah, no, that's helpful clarity.
Yes.
So that's what because I think that was one of my concerns around this, is if a sort of every 5, 6, 7 years we'll have a look at safeguarding. That didn't feel to me system-wide to be very robust, but there's a rolling month in normal industrial conditions. It's a rolling process.
Yes, and during action short of strike, some schools still engaged through district work, but not all schools. So there were some schools that would not let an inspector through the door, but there were others that would have engaged through district work and would have worked with us on different pieces of work, like the Empowering Improvement Framework. But there were others that just did not engage at all.
That's helpful, and I don't want to take up too much time, because I'm really just trying to make sure that I've understood just some of the processes that have led us to here. I wanted just to ask you. You had been very clear in your evidence that there is no other option. So I've probably 2 questions on that. One is around that process of potentially getting agreement with the unions, because and I know there's a wry smile there, but is that something that you'd mentioned in January? That process didn't go anywhere. Has that work been picked up again in terms of getting an agreement with the unions around excluding inspection from action short of strike, further to the pay deal and the agreements around workload, which all seem to have been received very positively in the evidence we heard today, the independent review of workload? Has that been picked up again?
Yeah, in terms of whether it could be excluded.
Seeking agreement with the unions around.
There hasn't been further discussion around that. I mean, the unions have been very clear in all previous discussions. Action short of strike has included inspection. There had been discussions with the trade unions about it being excluded prior to the previous period. It was not. I think it's highly unlikely that
you don't know, because if not, the conversation hasn't happened. Is that accurate?
We're not in negotiations with the unions about potential what would happen in a future piece of action short of strike. And
it's just the reason I ask, and I understand that that there's been fraught industrial relations for quite some time. I absolutely understand that. It was just to be clear, if the message is that there is no other option, just to check when the most recent engagement on that has been, because you've been clear it won't happen, it won't work, and I'm just wanting to check what's the up-to-date position on that, further to improve the industrial relations.
There was engagement for 8 years, and at various times during the 8 years there has been previous pay deals. It's not that 2025 is the first pay deal that's been secured. We've had periods without action short of strike. There's never been agreement to exclude inspection from action short of strike. And of course, if we get into a situation where it looks like there will be a further period of action short of strike, of course the department will attempt to negotiate an exclusion for inspection. But as you'll appreciate, that would have to be done each and every time there was a period of action short of strike. It's not an effective long-term safeguard or mechanism for our education system, because it's not removing inspection from the arena of industrial action, and that's the difference with this legislation. It takes inspection away from pay dispute. It takes inspection away from workload dispute. It gives it a legal protection that is separate and allows it to function and operate and provide those assurances to the public without that kind of fraught ongoing negotiation, dependent on pay, dependent on the industrial environment. So it's a very deliberate proposal to take it out of the industrial relations arena.
And look, last question for me is just to understand in terms of the global picture on this. So it's very clear that in terms of our neighbouring jurisdictions, that there is comparable legislation. Has the department looked at anything more widely, and is that something that could be shared with the committee to understand what the inspection regime looks like globally, so we can get a sense in comparable democracies and comparable education systems what that might look like?
So inspection varies from country to country, and there's a danger in some of that in comparing apples and oranges. When you're looking at the inspection processes across the British Isles, it's clearer what you're comparing. In other jurisdictions, the form and nature of inspection may be very different. What I would say is, when we've looked at it, it is not the norm for inspection not to function in 3/4 of inspections for 8 years. And I don't believe we'll find an international example or counterpart to Northern Ireland in that.
Okay, no, that's all very helpful, thank you. So I bring in the Deputy Chair, and when we're finished with that, we'll open up for other members.
And thanks for your presentation, Suzanne. Just to pick up on that last point that Nick was making there, and you said a couple of times in your presentation that inspection is the cornerstone of every high-functioning education system. And that's actually not accurate, because Finland has been held up as one of the top education systems in the world for a number of years now, and they don't have internal inspections there, external inspections, sorry. So, you know, and I'm just throwing that out there for information. But what I wanted to ask was, and the question was sort of asked, it wasn't answered in the way I would like it answered, how often, on average, are inspections carried out?
Well, before action short of strike, it would have been a 7 to 10 year window. So we would have had a cycle of 7 to 10 years for most inspections. Since action short of strike, we haven't been able to carry out inspections. So there are now schools that haven't had an inspection from 2011-12 because they were due an inspection in 2017-18. And one of the things I should say is that, you know, Suzanne has mentioned a couple of times about the 3/4 of schools that haven't engaged through this period of action short of strike. Some of that period was not when there was action short of strike. And if you just look at the periods of action short of strike, it's almost all schools haven't cooperated with inspections, so it's over 90%. That impacts on our ability to carry out an inspection within a reasonable cycle. It is the work that we're doing at the minute is looking at what types of work we're doing in schools. So, for example, we're looking at not just full inspections, but also looking at the engagement of our schools in thematic evaluations.
I understand that, Nicola.
Yes.
And really what I want to find out is how often schools are inspected on average. And you're saying it was 7 to 10 years.
Yes.
And my understanding now, and correct me if I'm wrong, the resources available to the Inspectorate now are less than there were in 2016.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So then we could expect that 7 to 10 year period will actually be extended. I'm going to put it to you then that a child could go to primary school, go through a primary school that wasn't inspected, could then go on to post-primary school, and depending on when that post-primary school was inspected, might go through their whole school career and that school not inspected either. You know, we're talking about a period of 14 years. That's a possibility, isn't it?
Well, what I would say is there's not a possibility for a student to go through schools in that way and not have engagement with ETI. In a non-action short of strike context. In a non-action short of strike context,
but is that not a possibility that a child could go through its whole school career and not be in a school that was subject to an inspection by ETI?
Not before action short of strike. So before action short of strike, we would have had a 7 to 10 year window, and we would have looked at that. So absolutely, that doesn't happen because we're conscious of that. We would have been doing area-based inspections. We did them in West Belfast, in Downpatrick, etc., to look at early years, primary, post-primary, special, youth. We were looking at the whole block through an area-based inspection in some schools where there were risks, where we had not been in carrying out a full inspection. But we have always got a district inspector who's engaging with the school and helping support that school through the lens of school improvement. And that's a core element of our work. We also then have the thematic evaluations, and we will then pick those schools that we're looking to see, is that a risk? And we'll then look and see, we'll pick those schools to go in as part of our thematic evaluations. So we're always keeping an eye to make sure that that doesn't happen, because that's the lens of us looking at, we refer to it as being proportionate to need, where children need us to be. And that's the lens that we take. So, and when it comes to recruitment, Pat, we are now at quite a low level because we could not recruit in an action short of strike context. We couldn't justify that to the public purse. But we've recruited 3 inspectors in recent months. We're going out for, on the 15th of September, for another 4, and then there will be another 4 after that. So we do need to recruit to ensure that we can manage that inspection cycle. So that's very much in our mind.
Pat, can I pick up your point just about Finland, because you raised it, and about high performance systems? Is that okay? And also just to make a point as an extension of Nicola's, that the point I made in my opening remarks, it's not just about individual institution inspection. The point is that the information from inspection across the board is aggregated, is used in thematic inspections to give us a picture of how our education system is performing overall, and to identify both strengths and areas of improvement at a system level. Just to be clear, in terms of Finland, Finland performed very strongly in PISA 2001. It's actually been in significant decline for the last 15 years. And if you read some of the important research literature on it by Tim Oates and others, Finnish Fairy Tales is an article I'd recommend to you. It actually talks you through how Finland's high performance in PISA was when it had a high accountability system, and that actually the decline that you see now is because of the low accountability approach. So if you're familiar with the literature in Finland, it's not a correct representation, and it's
We're running short of time. I think the Deputy Chair wants to come in, and then we'll probably need to draw a line on this.
One final question in terms of educational outcomes during this period of work to rule. The unions are saying that educational outcomes have actually improved over that period. What's the response of the department or the inspectorate to that?
Just ask a brief response.
Yeah, I'll pick that up. So in terms of the international studies, our outcomes are strong in TIMS and PEARLS. At primary level, our outcomes are strong. But when we look at our PISA data, which is our 15-year-olds, it has stagnated over the last 12 years. We're above average in reading, but we're only average in science and in mathematics. And in recent weeks, you will have saw the outcomes of Key Stage Assessment were published, and teachers themselves recorded that 28% of children at the end of Key Stage 2, at the end of P7, were not at the expected level in either communication, which you would be more familiar with as English, and mathematics. So I don't think it's a correct representation to say that standards are continued to improve during the period of action short of strike. It's a little bit like saying, Pat, standards improved during COVID because there was higher results, which of course is a nonsense. It just was a different awarding system. So I think when we look at our picture as a whole...
Are you saying then the unions are misrepresenting what's happening? Or what has
I'm saying they're
happened over the
using a
last number
data
of
set,
years?
and I'm offering other data that would give a fuller picture of the operation of our education system more widely. I think our colleagues in the Inspectorate would highlight, when they've gone back into schools post-COVID, that there are issues that they're seeing there in terms of teaching and learning. And just to say, the pandemic has had an international impact, including on disadvantaged children, so it'd be unlikely that those children wouldn't be impacted in Northern Ireland.
I could just come in. Yeah, thank you, Deputy Chair. Just if I'm asking for a question to be brought to an end, I expect members to work with me, but also witnesses. I'm no interest in cutting any evidence short, but I do have an interest in making sure everybody gets an opportunity to ask questions. So I'm going to open out to members now. So I've got John, David, Danny, we'll ask the clerk to get it. We'll see where we go from there. So I'll bring John in first.
Thank you. I'm personally alarmed and aghast that 3/4 of inspections have been disrupted in the last 8 years. I think that should be in the risk register of every school, in terms of safeguarding in particular. So thank you for the work you're doing. I just want to clarify, if it eases the concerns of some members, including the chair, about the absence of negotiation around this. I don't know if you heard the evidence of the unions. They clarified to me and cross-examination that there are no circumstances whatsoever in which they would ever agree to legislative protection of inspection. So your judgment call on that sounds to me to be quite right. I'll just move on to the next point. It was mentioned earlier in the previous session that this issue of the IP addresses, one of the members thought that some information was discarded. As I understand it, no, it was all presented, you just contextualise it.
Yeah, we provided the full data set, so all the responses that were recorded as parents that came from the same IP addresses as those from teachers were fully recorded, and they were given in the tables. We just clarified in some of the narrative underneath that there was double IP addresses there.
Thank you. That was my understanding. It was just, I think one of the other members thought it was discarded, was the phrase used, but that's not the
It
case.
absolutely wasn't. Both the full data set was presented throughout with just that bit of nuancing, and I think it is absolutely appropriate for the public to understand that there may have been multiple responses from the same individual.
The question I'm going to be asking of Nicola. The Justice Minister has warned that there'd be an increase in bullying, of a kind of a hate sort of bullying about LGBT pupils, trans pupils, because of the withdrawal of the EA's guidance on gender issues. I don't accept that teachers would be engaged in that bullying, but if we take at full face value the Justice Minister's concerns, is it your professional view that if there was a culture or practice of that kind of bullying, that inspection would be one way of identifying it?
I know that it is a way that it is identified. And this is where our work is focused a lot on observing practice in schools where teachers are going over and above for children and young people every day. But I'm thinking of, Barry, our training on Monday, which was our refresher training on child protection and safeguarding, because we have to have the highest expectations of ourselves when it comes to child protection and safeguarding. And one quote that was used was the Nelson Mandela quote of, "One cannot prepare for something while believing it will not happen." And that piece is important for us in that we have to believe that at times teachers are not always doing right by children. And we have evidence of that at times. But it's a very, very small piece, but it's an important piece. So, for example, when Action Short of Strike lifted, one of the first things that we were able to do was to share our questionnaires with schools, and schools distributed them to young people and to the teachers within the school. And very early on, we had a response from a young person saying that they were being bullied by the teacher. And I'm just giving this as an example, on the basis of race. And the young man stated that if this wasn't sorted, he would commit suicide.
Dear.
That's what he said. That's what was in his written response to us. And my fear is if we don't have this as a mechanism, then we run the risk of some of our children not having someone that they can disclose to. We carried out a piece of research on the preventative curriculum back in 2022, and in that piece we had some responses for children from the LGBTQAI+ community, and within that piece they were more likely to state that they did not feel safe in school. And we have to take that on board. we have to look to see what strategies can we have in schools to make sure that every child in school feels safe. That's a fundamental right of our children.
Just in the absence of time then, I thank you for the answer. I think it was really powerful. So could I, and I'll only ask a leading question where I'm just confirming something that you've already indicated to me, but just for absolute brevity and clarity. You believe, and you're from the Inspectorate, that any child who may be trans, gay, of colour, is actually safer from bullying as a result of inspection, and therefore by extension inspection being protected in law?
Just ask for a brief response to that question.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's certainly brief, thank you. That's great. Thank you, John. David, you'd indicated next.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by making clear certainly my perception. I'm sure you can confirm. We're getting very tied down sometimes necessarily here in the idea that the ETI is there to scrutinise just teachers. I have a school that's been mentioned quite a few times in this committee. It's St Donald High School. And last year the school I think was quite pleased with the ETI report, which said that the school was living out its vision of being a caring school at the heart of its community, and it absolutely is, and it's doing so in fairly dreadful conditions. And I've talked about, I'm not going to list everything as I have previously on this committee, but the ETI report was probably one of the most useful tools in shining a light on what needed to be done and giving a bit of urgency to what needed to be done for that. So our inspections are not just about turning a spotlight on teachers and putting them under duress in any way. It's actually about sometimes finding the issues that are putting barriers in the way for teaching staff to give the best possible education to our children. And I thank them for that work. It's a comment. You can comment. I'm going to move on to some questions, and you can comment on that when I come over if you wish. Going back then to some of the comments that were made and safeguard, could I just clarify that we had that situation where there was action short of strike during that time, and understanding that there's issues ongoing there, and not putting the blame on anyone in that regards. Has there been safeguarding issues identified from during that time that went undiscovered because we had a lack of inspection?
You mean now?
Have we become aware that there were issues that might otherwise have been discovered because of inspection that have come to light?
We can talk a little bit about perhaps some of the issues that the ETI have found this year when they've been back inspecting schools around that issue.
I'll start first with the first point that you were making, which I thank you for. A key role for us is advocating for teachers. Through our thematic evaluations, we can see the barriers that are facing teachers to deliver high quality education, particularly in a way that is equitable. So it is key for us to be able to voice those concerns and to provide advice to the department on where things could be changed to make things better for our teaching workforce. An example of that would have been the teacher professional learning to support children with SEN evaluation, where we said that teachers are not provided with sufficient support to meet the needs of the children presenting in classrooms at that time. And we had a range of recommendations for the Education Authority in the main about things that had to change, that were practical and things that could have an impact at pace. And some of that work has been taken forward really well by the Education Authority, and there is still work to be done. The other piece, this is a piece that's quite difficult for me to talk about without identifying specific schools in a way that I don't actually want to do. But we have had a number of cases of where we are now in schools in this year, and we are seeing things that have been in place for quite some time. For example, say training is to be carried out every 2 years. We have schools that haven't carried it out for over 4 years. And with that, it might sound like it's a technical piece, a bit that's not that important, but it affects the culture of a school in terms of, if you're not prioritising that as part of your training, children feel it in other ways. and it can prevent disclosures because teachers do not feel confident. So sometimes I'll hear it was only the policy or it was only a bit of training that wasn't carried out. This has massive impacts, particularly whenever there is a change of staffing and whatever, that if a teacher doesn't feel able to doesn't know what to do when a child discloses, they behave in a certain way. So for me, there's a bit where it's not just, though, I look at safeguarding and I say, we've got policies, we've got training, and then we have practice. And quite often for us, the policies can be fine, but the practice isn't. Mm-hmm. And that's where, when I hear the teaching union saying that they do cooperate with safeguarding during inspection, that's their lens. Their lens is that if we called for a safeguarding inspection, they would cooperate with us. And the phrase that they use is, first of all, that teachers are not to cooperate with the Education and Training Inspectorate. They also provide guidance that if an inspector goes into a classroom, they are to stop teaching. Yeah. They also have this line.
Just repeat that for me.
Mm-hmm, that if an inspector goes into a classroom, they are to stop teaching and to supervise the class. So there was guidance that stated that.
David's keen to come in with another question, I think very short on time, so to give you the opportunity
you want to comment first there?
No, for comment or question, but it would
need
to be again
it's just to come back again, and thank you for your answering that, it's very useful. I'd just say that the chair made up, not unreasonably, was talking about sort of normal practice, and I understand where that questions came from around the survey responses and so on, or the consultation responses. I'm less interested in normal practice and more interested in good practice and best practice. And I have to say, it's right, you've said that those who are most concerned and are at the coalface have the opportunity and respond and will naturally respond in greater number. What I would say is nobody in a consultation, no matter whether they hold dual roles and so on, is entitled to game the system. And I'm not saying that some people may have done that on a genuine basis, but we need to make sure that there isn't multiple responses coming from one people that may bias the system. So I think it's right and it's good that the department is having safeguards in place to ensure that that does not happen.
Mm-hmm. Response has been provided to that. If you're content to take that as a comment, I mean, is there anything
Suzanne maybe wants to comment if you...
Just to say that is obviously why Citizen Space do routinely collect the IP addresses to support the integrity of consultation processes and to avoid automation and to avoid that situation where you do have a significant gaming, and I'm not saying that's what took place in any way in this instance, but that's why those safeguards are in place in any consultation.
It's not a,
It was just to be clear if there was anything new to add to that, but that's fine and that's noted. Danny, you were next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank yous. I'm going to start off by just asking, because a lot of concerns around the IP stuff. Who gave the direction to track the IP addresses?
So
it's done automatically.
They're automatically recorded.
Well, who gave the direction to do it the way you have done it here, with the releasing of it?
Who decided whether?
Yeah, because to my knowledge, it's not.
Well, officials decided to present the information in that format.
But it's not the normal. We haven't come across. I just want to give that direction, because relationships are key here. I'm building on them. If you were looking from the outside here, listening as a teacher, because the cornerstone of our education, in my experience, is our school leaders, our teachers, our classroom assistants, who have done an amazing job that they're doing. And there's many reasons why there is educational underachievement. One, in my opinion, that screws it all, is warps the whole system, is academic selection. Right. So before we get into I'm not going to get into the core stuff of what kids are falling behind on, but it is important that this consultation was widely rejected, but yet the data was then released to almost, I suppose, manipulate, misrepresent, because I have never seen a consultation broke down like that before. So I'm trying to understand why.
Well, just to say, there was absolutely no misrepresentation of the data. The data was given in absolute full. It was given every group.
Suzanne, to
was
be
given.
fair.
I have seen data presented in a whole range of ways. I can't answer for all public consultations across the all public consultations across the public sector. I have seen data presented in a whole variety of ways. I have seen incidents where where multiple respondents or where campaign responses have been counted as single responses.
It would be fair for a teacher. Sorry to come it would be fair for a teacher or a school leader who's listening to this now or seen the way that's came through to say they are misrepresenting what has clearly been put forward. The IP address is like a parent. Whether you're a teacher, you're still a parent as well.
Of course, absolutely.
And the way it was represented. So, to me, you're at a stage now where, and we heard it from the unions, where things are working, and there was workload issues there in the past. The very much reason why they weren't engaging was because of the extra bureaucracy that was being put on them from the ETA. Right, so that has moved away from it. So the real question is, why decide now to go and do this? Why make this the cornerstone of going forward?
I'll answer, just finish on the IP addresses, and it's just to say all responses are valued. Every response that was returned was counted.
But you've done it with an asterisk. I'm really sorry, but you've done it with an asterisk. You know, you see that when someone does that, they're almost saying, "There's the data, but."
We didn't use an asterisk.
No, you didn't.
We gave a qualification statement that highlighted that some respondents responded multiple times, and we clarified that, but we didn't use an asterisk, and all the tables presented.
No, but sorry,
the full
but a bit of the
information.
terminology and we're kind of a game in the system, that wee words getting dropped in there paints a different picture. I'm awfully sorry, but that's
I don't think I used the term.
No, I know you didn't, but it was said across and then it said, we're not saying that this is happening, but these are the words. This is what I mean about relationships and good communication and where we're getting to now. This is what teachers are telling me. This is what school leaders will tell me. That they're in a good place now, but this decision now would criminalise them for taking action. You know, what good is that? What in confidence building is that going to do if we're really looking for a child-centred approach as well?
This legislation is in place in the Republic of Ireland, in England, Scotland and Wales. No teacher has ever been prosecuted. So the law is about prevention.
Why bring it then?
Because its existence has ensured that in each of those 4 jurisdictions, 2 of which have improved, England and the Republic of Ireland have continued to improve and now outperform us in every domain in PISA. When we used to outperform them 10 years ago. They've continued to improve. We have not. We have stagnated in PISA. They have a legal protection that enables inspection to operate consistently. So they have not had 3/4 of inspections disrupted in the last 8 years. They've had a consistent, uninterrupted, unimpeded programme of inspection due to the legislative framework that's in place, and it hasn't resulted in the criminalisation of any teacher.
Brief
but that's like saying then inspections will be the reasons then why our schools achieve more, and completely ignores the elephant in the room that warps our whole education system, which is academic selection.
There's a whole variety of reasons for underperformance.
I know, and that's the point. But you're selling a thing here that it's
saying
inspections.
That the lack of inspection is not helpful in supporting or driving improvement across our education system. That inspection is a key means of identifying schools that require support. Are there a range of factors that lead to educational underachievement and poor performance? Of course. And the biggest single factor, though, in a high quality education system and improving student outcomes is the quality of teaching. And if the quality of teaching is not being assessed and monitored, then you can see some of the difficulties that you have. Single biggest factor, every single study by OECD and others will tell you that every other structural factor, including academic selection, pales into significance compared to the quality of the experienced teaching in the classroom.
I'll Peter, you had indicated next.
Can I just add something, Danny, about inspection and
Ask that be brief, because we're about
please,
to bring
it will be.
I'm not saying I'm against inspection. I'm just challenging you on,
Yeah.
specifically around the data and way it was presented. but also then where we're sitting right now. Things are really building as a good relationships, but this has a potential to
Do you
disrupt
just think
all
in the
of
interest of fairness to members it's probably
Okay,
reasonable
no
to bring
problem.
Peter in at this point?
I was more than happy to give Danny a little bit of extra time there in the efforts of building relationships. My questions are fairly straightforward. Can I first of all ask who holds the responsibility for evaluating safeguarding procedures in schools in Northern Ireland?
ETI.
Okay. During action short of strike, is safeguarding, in your professional opinion, fully evaluated to professional standard?
Cannot be evaluated fully.
Okay. Given your answers, could it be classed as an increased safeguarding risk that during ASOS there is no evaluation of safeguarding procedures?
Yes.
You're doing very well. This is dead easy, isn't it? Okay. And would legislation, as described in this session, would you deem that as a way to mitigate the risk that you've just said could be concurrent with a lack of inspection?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the only other question I have is slightly wider, and you'll be able to give a wee bit of narrative, I imagine, around this. So is it your view that having inspections, and we're thinking about how, certainly Mark in the last session said that the relationship between ETI and the unions and teachers has improved significantly over the last, and I imagine it's to the credit of some of the people we have in front of us today and the unions in terms of building that relationship. But I think from their perspective, there's also that ETI are coming in to inspect us and they're going to mark our homework and we'll get, in my case, probably a D or an E in school, but other grades are available. However, my understanding is that school inspections are meant to help support schools which are having specific problems or issues. So is it your view, and how does ETI, if there wasn't action short of strike and if inspections were happening as they are in the rest of the jurisdictions in the British Isles, how would inspections actually help support schools which are having those specific problems or issues?
Before you come in, Nicola, could I just give a couple of figures around that, Peter, just to clarify? 71 inspections took place in schools this year unimpeded by action short of strike, because obviously we've had an industrial relations agreement. And of those 71 schools, 9 schools were identified, 13% as requiring a progress inspection, and 5 of those schools were placed into formal intervention to receive intensive and sustained support. So it's a significant percentage of schools that then receive sustained support through the Education Authority to improve practice and to improve teaching and learning, leadership, governance, whatever the issues identified by ETI. And no school went into formal intervention in the 8 years prior to that due to the impact of action short of strike. And I think that is a startling figure in terms of schools not being identified to get the support that they need to improve. And the children, Pat talked about earlier, children passing through school without an inspection. I would worry that a whole cohort passed through school in those 8 years without their school being identified for the support that it needed.
So what you're saying there, sorry Susie, what you're saying is that there could be schools, and it's not about targeting schools, but there could be schools that have not been identified that need help and support, but over that period, ETI, because they couldn't go in, couldn't identify the schools, and in turn they couldn't get the help and support that they need to be a higher performing school.
I think it's more than could, Peter. I think it is definitely, because in the previous 8 years, 80 schools had been identified as needing help and support, so I cannot believe that would go to no schools needing help and support in the next 8 years.
I tend to agree with you. Sorry, I interrupted Nicola. You're finishing with a point there, Nicola, and that's me finished.
A key facet of our work as well, whenever we're in schools, is the dissemination of the highly effective practice that we see, and that helps to support school improvement. We hold events very regularly on themes such as emotional health and well-being, on thematic pieces in different phases, in special educational needs. We hold seminars and dissemination events where we showcase the highly effective practice that we see. Mm-hmm. And that's key for those schools that are struggling to address the needs of some of the children and to make those links. So part of our district work as well is, and I do want to make the point that there are some schools that did not allow us to go in as district inspectors during that period of action, short of strike, and some that did. And in that time, we can then say to them, look, there's a school up the road here that's been working on this area, and therefore, make those links and those and build those relationships, because it's always the next bit. So you're looking and going through inspection, rather than saying this is an outstanding or an inadequate or whatever. We're in schools saying these are the strengths of this school and the next steps for this school are. And in that model,
I could just draw your remarks to a close,
yeah,
please.
so it is a focus on improvement, even more so than accountability. It is more on improvement. That's our balance. Our balance is much more on skill improvement.
Out of time, Peter, unfortunately.
Sure.
And Michelle, you'd indicated last.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, folks, for the time today. I just have a couple of questions. Having listened to everything that have just come to mind for myself, kids who are electively home educated, what safeguarding's in place for them?
It's an issue for us. There's a number of children who are missing from school. So we, and it's why we look more widely. We would have had a focus on individual organisation inspection only in the past, with very few thematic evaluations. Our work is much more balanced now, looking at individual organisation inspection, but even individual organisation inspection is looking much more widely. We've got a core question 5, which is a school within its community, and looking at the community of learning for how is a school supporting all children within the community.
So I'm talking about absence, I mean.
Yes, and I'm moving to that piece now. There's a number of children who are missing from school. And one of them, for us, would be those who are electively home educated. And we have issues, and we're seeing the issues in the Republic of Ireland now. So we have got issues in our system that need to be addressed. And that would be one area that would cause us concern.
Yeah, and in terms of addressing that, what specifically are you doing in the context of ETI, for example? Are you noting when schools don't complete the SA1 form, when a child deregisters? Is that something that's captured?
Yes, but we've just completed a primary.
So there was a circular said that schools weren't always doing that.
That's right. We carried out in June a thematic district engagement piece that looked at attendance solely in our primary schools, and some elements of this were picked up through that piece. We also then in our post-primary looked at the anti-bullying legislation and looking at where schools were at there. So those were the two foci for June for us, and we've presented papers then to the department on particular learning that needs to be taken forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you about bullying next. So obviously you've got perhaps a different context in schools now around that. So what happens now in terms of monitoring schools' compliance with bullying legislation in terms of inspection?
So in all inspections, that's part of the evidence base, because we're looking at equity, diversity and inclusion. So there's a piece there on anti-bullying, and we look at how schools are monitoring the bullying. We look at the Board of Governors minutes, we look at how that information is being shared, but most importantly we look at the actions that governors are taking as a consequence of the information that they're being provided with.
I think we're at the stage now we need to get that data properly disaggregated to see what the different triggers for bullying are in schools.
Yes, because we have found that not all schools are.
Yeah, just so that can be shared, so that we all have an awareness of what's going on in schools in terms of bullying behaviours and why particular children are being targeted, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think yes, absolutely. There is, but I think that the data has to be clearly stated in terms of how it's going to be articulated, how it's going to be understood. You know, when some schools have 0, that's an issue for us to tease out.
When you say disaggregated to school level, I mean just the different reasons across the school estate. I don't necessarily at all suggest that would be.
In terms of just the department, just to clarify that my group doesn't have responsibility for elective home education or for bullying in schools. So if you want a longer written response, I'm more than happy for a departmental response. Nicola's obviously answered from an ETI perspective, but neither myself or Kathryn are equipped really to answer that from a departmental perspective. I'd like to get you a fuller written response on that, if that's okay.
That'd be great, yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you all for your time and again for your patience earlier. And no doubt we'll be hearing it again. And I think if maybe I could finish with a comment, probably not agreement, I think, or there's maybe just some questions around the room, just around the legislation and maybe some different views. And I'm very happy. I think the committee needs to take the time to work through those. But I think a positive from this is the message we're hearing about the reset of relations within ETI and the teaching unions, and that seems to be having real positive impact in the system in the here and now. So wherever this goes, I think that's a real positive we can all take from this conversation. But thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
I'll just make a point of information. Just a point of information. I know Suzanne didn't mean to misrepresent the situation with Finland. Finland are just outside the top 10 top education systems in the world. They haven't fallen off a cliff. They're ahead of the UK, they're ahead of Austria, they're ahead of the Netherlands, places like that, which are held up as, top class education systems. So I'm just making that point for information.
Is the trajectory downwards?
No.
It's not?
No, it has risen in the last couple of years.
Probably as witnesses have left their seats, maybe not the time to this, but we'll put it on the...
We're interested in learning experiences, not just outcomes. The quality of the learning experience is crucial to us. It's not just about the standards at the end.
Wouldn't be normal practice after we've closed the session to continue the evidence, so we'll leave it at that. Okay, members, very conscious of time, so what I would suggest is I'm going to make a proposal here. I think largely that was a pre-legislative briefing, so I'm not going to suggest that there's any outworkings. I think when a bill emerges, we'll obviously engage with that as a committee. There was a lot of other issues covered in the SEN space with the unions. I'm also going to make a suggestion as we are moving into the space of looking at an inquiry into that. I'm not sure that multiple bits of correspondence to the department back and forward during that is helpful, unless there's anything in particular anybody feels they would like to deal with in that space. Or are we content to note? So John first.
It's just one question, it's just a confirmation. I couldn't pick up whether Justin McCamphill's comment about a minister speaking recklessly, was that the Justice Minister or the Education Minister? Because I was making notes. Does anyone recall?
The clerk speak to.
I think it was. I don't think it was in relation to the Education Minister.
Right. I just didn't want to quote out of. Yeah. That's fine. No, I was just trying to clarify that it was. Yeah.
No problem. Peter.
Yeah. Whether we could get a little bit more written evidence, whether this involves the committee writing to Dr. Kingon or Nicola around safeguarding schools and inspection. I think that's a critical area. That was obviously where my questions focused on. I'd like some more information around that, about the level of inspections that can be carried out during action sort of strike. What impact these guys? These guys are actually the ETI people, are the experts. This is what they do. So what impact is that having, and what ongoing risks are there? Because I did take them on a journey there that they eventually said that they would consider that a risk. I'd like some more detail around that, because I think that is, we can have a discussion around the impacts on quality of teaching and learning and so forth and educational standards, and those are all very well and very important. That is crucial. So I'd like some more information. If we could write to the department and just ask, or ETI, and ask for some more information around that.
Members agreed in that correspondence? Have no objection to that. Agreed? Okay. That's okay. And just from Clark's perspective, anything that you want to add?
No, I just wanted to check. Michelle had asked about the stats around bullying. Is that something that then it was recommended that would need to come from the department, so we can follow up on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to raise when we get to this bit that we do have an outstanding action on our forward work programme around bullying, and maybe something to bring forward now. Like I said, there's a different context in schools now, so I'm not so concerned about getting a briefing from these guys. If they want to send me information, that's fine, but I think that just might be worth looking at in its own right now.
Yeah, not to sort of jump to forward work planning,
Yes.
but I'd be happy to note at this stage that I think we've said a number of times that we're interested in a bit of post-legislative scrutiny around the Tackling Bullying in Schools Act, and I think it would be good to hear from the department on that. So if members are agreed that we are clear, we want that factored into our forward work planning. Is there agreement on that? Agreed? Okay. Okay, members, that takes us to correspondence. Now, this comes with a big health warning here, as we've got a large backlog of correspondence to work through, so we will try and be as rapid as we possibly can through this. So as is normal practice, you've got at pages 83 to 610 and 14 onwards of tabled papers, we have items under correspondence. The summary notes at page 83 of your packs. I will go through anything that I think needs a decision or discussion. Other than that, it will be as per the summary note unless a member should raise it. So I'll go through these. Item 8.3, page 176. It's correspondence from the Committee for the Economy calling for evidence on the Insolvency Amendment Bill. I don't see levels of crossover there, so I'd propose we note. Item 8.5, page 264. Correspondence from the Department of Education about the transfer of the power to issue indemnities in Northern Ireland to museums, galleries and libraries to enable them to borrow high-value items for public exhibition under the Government Indemnity Scheme to the Department for Communities, and the Department is seeking the Committee's endorsement of the transfer of those powers. It does not seem to sit sensibly within the education remit to me. All of those areas fall under the Department for Communities, and it seems a sensible intervention unless members have any other views. Are we agreed? Item 8.7, page 373, is a copy of correspondence from the Committee of Health to the Minister of Education asking him to meet with members of the Youth Assembly. I think certainly encourage him to do so, but I would be suggesting we probably note that at this stage. It's proposed to note. Item 8.10, page 403, response from the Minister of Education regarding a concern about the Department's engagement on the School Uniforms Bill and the associated timeframes for delivery. I think we're probably, issues have moved on. We've got consideration stage landing on Monday. I would propose to note, other than to say it remains a disappointment we don't have sight of draft guidelines to understand what the current intention is around the bill's practical outworkings, unless anyone wants to add anything to that. Okay, so we will note. Item 8.11, page 405, is correspondence from the Department of Education on a rise in the annual household earnings threshold for free school meals and uniform grant applications for those in receipt of universal credit. Happy to open up to seek members' views, but would propose at this stage that we note. Agreed to note. Item 8.12, page 407, correspondence from the Department again, update to support young carers and the upcoming launch of Teach the Teachers video by Action for Children. Again, it looks very positive intervention, but would propose to note. Item 8.13, page 409, correspondence from the Committee for the Executive Office, forwarding correspondence it sent to the Department of Education asking about steps being taken to embed the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls strategy in schools. And I would just propose that we do write to the Department of Education asking that the committee be copied into its response to that correspondence, if members are agreed. Item 8.16, page 415, correspondence from the Children's Law Centre regarding absenteeism in schools, and there are links to some really powerful interviews with young people, and if members haven't had the opportunity to view those, I would really encourage you to do so. Happy to hear members' views, but I do think there was no suggestion from the Law Centre. I don't think that they wanted to specifically present on this issue, but I would suggest that, again, just into factoring in for the forward work plan, I think we are not potentially going to get some things in now before Christmas, I would imagine, but I think a detailed briefing around attendance is something I would still see, along with the bullying piece, as a bit of a gap in the evidence we've received in committee so far, and I would be keen if members are agreed to add that into forward work planning. Members are agreed? I think the attendance issue is really critical, and there's just so many factors feeding into that. We may cover some of it in our SEN inquiry, as that is part of the piece on that. Item 8.17, page 417, it's an update from Caleb's Cause NI and its campaign to support young school leaders with complex needs transitioning out of the school system into other services. I'm going to suggest that we do invite Alma and Caleb's Cause to give evidence to the SEN inquiry. I think we've all been clear that the parental perspectives are really important, and I think we often miss that transition piece, it doesn't get the attention I think it really needs in the area of SEN. So if members are agreed, I would be happy to extend that.
Almost brought good focus to it, Chair, I would note, over the last while, but that's definitely the place to hear it. So yeah, absolutely.
Agreement there. Okay. And then on, don't have the item 8.19 on page 453 is correspondence from the Independent Autism Reviewer regarding SEN placements. I've been advised through the clerk that we actually do have the Autism Reviewer confirmed for next week in terms of an evidence session, so probably best to pick that up when she presents to committee if members are agreed. Yep. Right. Item 8.20, page 468, correspondence from the Department of Education providing the business plan 2024-25 end of year report and on progress of the business plan for 25-26. Seem appropriate to arrange a briefing on this matter. Again, can't guarantee how quickly that would be given other work priorities, but are members content to seek a briefing on that? Mm-hmm. Agreed. Item 8.21, page 470, it's correspondence from a member, Timothy Gaston, asking the committee to add this NI Survivor Council to its list of consultees. I would be content that they be added to that list. I did have the opportunity to actually meet with the NI Survivor Council over the summer, and they are very keen to have a role in informing government policy around issues around victims and survivors of sexual abuse, and I think that would be relevant to our work if members are agreed. Item 8.22, page 472, is correspondence from the Women's Rights Network providing a submission to the committee inquiry into RSE. Quite a late submission, but I'm content that if members are agreed, we add that to the inquiry papers, if that's agreed. Agreed. Item 8.23, page 499, is correspondence from the Integrated Education Fund regarding concerns about methodology used to produce the Parental School Admissions Survey and the promotion of the findings. I do think the correspondence, having read it, raises some questions around exactly what approach was taken, particularly into who was issued the survey and which arm's length bodies were issued the survey. It seems quite stark to me that NICE didn't get included in the arm's length body circulation of that survey. I do struggle to understand that, and also I think there are queries around the survey intending to go out to parents involved in the admissions survey seems to have been circulated a lot more broadly to parents in general, with an encouragement for responses. So given some of the evidence we've heard today with concerns around how surveys can be used and abused, I think it would be appropriate to share that with the Minister if members are agreed and ask for a response. And I would be quite clear, I'd like to get a specific response to the specific questions if members are agreed. Agreed. Item 8.24 on page 503, it's a response from the Education Minister to concerns raised in relation to the systems in place to provide special educational needs placements. Happy to open up for members' views. I would just note a couple of things. There was quite a confident assertion from the Minister that he's confident that the system's going to step up to deliver on this, but there wasn't a lot of detail about how he was going to ensure that would happen, which did raise a little concern for me. But I would be proposing again, in the spirit of us entering into the inquiry on this, that again I'm not sure another bit of correspondence to the Minister is going to shed much light on it unless anyone has a strong view otherwise. Any other views? No?
Well, Deputy Chair, just in terms of what one of the union witnesses was saying, we know how many places are needed for next year, and that work needs to begin now. It's no good going out to schools after Easter and asking them to set up a specialist provision class. But I agree with you, we're not going to get much information or light.
We do have the EA in on placements, so I think that to me is a clear action arising from a reference today. What is being done around school engagement now? So I do think that's important to note. Okay, so I think we're agreed there. Item 8.25, page 506, response from the Education Authority in relation to access to teach training for mainstream schools. Happy to hear members' views. I would certainly propose we share that response with NAHT, who had previously raised concerns around that access with members, and I also think it would be probably an appropriate time as we start the new session to get an update from the department in writing on the progress of the guidelines on restrictive practice, which has been stalled for some time now, if members are agreed. Item 8.26, page 509, is a response to the Minister of Education regarding the Youth Assembly's report, Curriculum for the 21st Century, Learning for Life and Work. Are members content that we share the Minister's response with the Youth Assembly at this stage, and they can obviously come back to us with feedback if we're agreed. Item 8.27, page 510, correspondence from the Department of Health regarding the Health Minister's recent visit to the Shankill Women's Centre. Correspondence notes the facilities could be of interest to committees wishing to hold meetings outside Parliament buildings. We can certainly bear that in mind, but are members content to note? Item 8.29, page 512, is correspondence from the Department of Education providing the response to its consultation on 16 to 18 legislation. The Department have already been clear they want to brief us on that, and that's the most. I don't think correspondence at this stage would be helpful. The oral briefing makes sense if members are agreed.
Yep.
Agreed. Item 8.30, page 553, invitation to the Supporting Care Leavers Conference 2025 taking place online on the 7th of October. I propose we note for diaries. Is that agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Item 8.31, page 555, correspondence from the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs seeking views on the dilapidation bill. I would propose that we write to both the department and the EA on this to get a sense of how it would see its duties potentially being impacted by this legislation, because we have an issue with there are derelict and empty buildings on the school estate not being used. So I think it would be good to get an early sense from those agencies, the department and the EA, around how they would attempt to their plans to address issues around dereliction, dilapidation and vacant buildings, if members are agreed.
Yeah.
Item 8.32, page 596, is a response from the EA in relation to SEND placements. I'm going to again propose we note there's some concerning stats in there, but as they're briefing us next week, again, that feels like the appropriate forum if members are agreed. Agreed. Mm-hmm. Item 8.33, page 598, invitation for the Ulster University to the launch of the Imaginarium exhibition Youth Visions for a Sustainable Future. Propose we note for diaries if that's agreed. Mm-hmm. Item 8.34, page 600, it was an invitation to the chairperson to attend the Open Five Nations Citizenship Education Conference. I have confirmed I am free to attend that if members are content that I attend. Agreed. Item 8.35, page 602, invitation to the chairperson to attend the Outdoor Communication Board launch event on the 6th of November 2025. I have advised I'm unavailable to attend on that date, but content for other members to, even perhaps through the clerk, to feed in if that's something they're interested in attending on behalf of the committee, if I can leave that with members, if we're agreed. Item 8.37, we are nearly there, we're getting there. Page 610 is correspondence from Portadown Integrated Nursery and Primary School, thanking me for visiting the school. I want to be very clear, I did not attend the school in my capacity as chair. It was a visit in my capacity as a private member along with a party colleague. But they did, on the back of that meeting, send this correspondence in raising concerns about the current accommodation at the school and funding delays for the new school building. This was covered in question time. A member from the local constituency had raised this. It was Doug Beattie, I believe. So I wanted just to propose on this. I am aware of some of the detail that, if members were agreed, we write to the Minister, really to get a sense of how quickly they're able to move on this and to potentially influence the disposal of the land that needs to be carried out from the council. That is the issue. That is where it is stalled. And the school are very anxious. They are shovel ready in absolutely every other respect, but there's a delay in the council disposing of the land to the department for building, and I think they're just worried in the current competitive environment for capital funding they'll miss out, and I think that would be a shame. So I think if we could engage with the department to encourage them to move that process on through council channels, that would be welcome if members are agreed. Agreed. Item 8.39 in tabled papers at page 19, I believe it is an item referring to alleged financial irregularities in an individual school. So I want to just, first of all, there's a couple of things. I'm noting time, first of all, and I am conscious this could be quite a long and detailed discussion potentially in relation to this matter, and I think we'll also need a discussion on how to handle this matter in terms of whether it is in or out of public session. Given time, and I want to be clear, I'm proposing this on the basis that this matter warrants proper attention, so I want to be very, very clear on that. I am going to propose we carry that item of correspondence over to next week to ensure that we do not have a hurried discussion on this and move on. Can I check with members if they are content with that? and I want to be clear why I'm making that proposal. I'm aware it is approaching 5:20, and I think there are certain items that come in correspondence that warrant a proper committee conversation. Do we have agreement?
Yes.
Great. Peter, there's a little. I
I'll
can
give
see.
it a
I can
sigh. Well,
sense.
look,
I can
as
see
you know,
that
Chair,
somewhere.
it came in. It was sent in to me and asked to be
And I
forwarded
think
to
that
the
I wanted
committee.
to give you an opportunity to speak, and I just for full disclosure,
No, I agree.
I've spoken with Peter around this because he had advised me that he was going to request this item be put on the agenda as he'd been contacted. I appreciate you were keen to speak to it, but I don't think we're going to have the conversation that this item warrants at this stage, unless if there's a strong feeling. I mean, I've know where I need to be, but I just suspect, given that we'll have to work out how we're hearing the issue, and before we get to it, that would be my proposal.
The agenda for next week, I mean, we could easily end up in a similar situation.
Again, to ensure we don't, I'm very happy to front load this to the top of the agenda as an item of correspondence and matters arising, to ensure that we don't hit that issue. And I hope that gives confidence. I am not trying to get this item off the agenda under any circumstances, if we're agreed. Okay. Item 8.4, page 25 of tabled papers. It's correspondence from Send Reform NI highlighting questions they would like to be put to the Education Authority at next week's briefing. So I would propose that we note, and members can pick that up in the briefing next week. But I would just add it would be good to just, again, I think Send Reform NI had been reached out to provide a parental perspective for the inquiry. It'd be good maybe just to get assurances that's going to be chased, if that could be done. Okay, and you can all take a deep breath. Item 8.41 on page 27 of tabled papers is the 43rd report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. And I don't actually know how this is made onto my briefing because I thought it would have been on the table of correspondence to note. I will propose we note.
Read it, Chair.
Okay.
Could you read it out there?
I'll leave that for you in your own time, David. So our members are intent, therefore, to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 83 with all of those above exceptions.
Agreed.
Item 9 is Forward Work Programme at page 37 of the tabled papers. So there's just a couple of things. I want to first of all seek the committee's agreement that they endorse the Forward Work Programme that is in your tabled papers. There are already a couple of early sort of high-level briefings scheduled on our SEN inquiry, as well as a placements briefing next week, so that is moving ahead. So if we're content with that, we agreed on Monday loosely that at our strategic planning that we would move to an every other week approach to the inquiry, so that we don't overly disrupt other business, but that we do have appropriate time to look at the SEN issues. Clark had written out to members, and this does factor into forward work planning in relation to the terms of reference for the committee's SEN review. Can I, or SEN inquiry or review, could I just propose to members that we defer that to next week, but if I could ask that before close of play this week that members have shared any amendments to that, so that we can have the full discussion on that next week at that committee if members are agreed, and we'll ask that the terms of reference be tabled as its own item, so that it's not we don't miss that. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
And then on Monday, one last outstanding item which links to our forward work programme, but really in terms of activity in the chamber, is the joint motion with the Economy Committee. Now I note that one of the big asks in that motion, the Careers Action Plan, has been published, and I think we probably need to hear evidence on that in this committee or concurrently with the Economy Committee. But there's really two ways we can approach that. We can look at redrafting the motion to still cover the issues, or we can withdraw the motion and return to it in due course and monitor the progress on those other actions around that space. So happy to open up to members. My sense is, in terms of the pressures on time in the chamber, given that there's been a substantive change with the Careers Action Plan, we may want to consider withdrawing and linking in with the Economy Committee around a concurrent meeting where the issues can be tracked. Were we agreed?
It starts to get clunky otherwise. You start talking to things.
I would agree. Nobody wants another redraft by committee. Okay, so that is everything on forward work plans. If my plan of members are agreed. And then final thing is just to draw attention to a note tabled at page 47 of table papers to be added to the cite against the committee report. There was just a request from the department of a couple of points of clarification, I think, around departmental attendance. Is that's the issue? So really just in point of fact there, if members can note. And then item 10 is any other business. Do we have any other business? No. So that leaves us then to item 11, date, time and place of next meeting. The next committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday the 17th of September at 2 p.m. in room 29. So I would just leaves me then to put the question at the committee meeting. Does now adjourn, or are we agreed?
Agreed. Thank you, Chair.